Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Walk Around Community Centre and to Truth Seekers North East. And it's good to see some faces here because there wasn't many when we first got here, so I was a bit concerned, like especially with the weather being as it is. So I'm looking forward to today's event. I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Kieran Woodhouse, who's a paranormal investigator. And he's going to tell you all about his experiences and what actually that entails. So, without further ado, I'll pass it over to you, Kieran. Thank you.
Thank you. So, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. So today, as I was introduced there, today I'm going to be talking about paranormal investigation and what that entails, because a lot of people will watch it on TV and they'll get a misconception of what a paranormal investigation actually is. And they come along expecting something and they get something completely different, and you run the risk there of losing people within the field. So we'll crack on. So beginnings, and so personally for myself, I've always been interested in the paranormal. So growing up as a child, we lived in a house where my mum's nan would regularly come and visit us long after she'd died, and she'd come and show that she was there by banging the child gate on the top of the stairs to show my mum that she hadn't locked it, and there was a risk that myself and my brother would fall down the stairs. She would tuck me in bed and put my mobile on when my dad would forget again. So my mum would go to do it and I'd be all tucked up with my little mobile going. And she would quite regularly, to my mum's annoyance, rearrange the furniture in the living room, which is quite a feat because, you know, heavy ornaments and vases. So particularly, my mum had a set of vases, big, medium and small, and she would have them like so on the fireplace. And we would go out and regularly come back to find that they were how her nan would like them. So I think it was one on the TV, one over on the fireplace and one on the table. And that's how they would always argue when she was alive. That's how she wanted them, and she would still, in death, want it just like that. So growing up in a situation like that was quite interesting for me, because there was something unseen that was affecting our daily lives. So I began to question why is that happening. And then as we moved house, and we moved. I don't know how many of you guys believe in synchronicity or fate or whatever it is we want to call it. So we moved to another house, and when my dad told his dad, so my granddad, that we were moving there, he was very interested in the street that we'd moved to, and it turned out that the very house that we'd moved and brought was the very house that my granddad was born in. And my dad didn't know this. So my granddad and his sister were born in this house, so it was always interesting to see him come up and just sit there looking around, probably remembering how it was when he was a child. But interestingly, my mum's nan has never followed us to that house, and we think it's because she doesn't want to tread on the toes of my dad's family, because my dad's auntie now resides in that house. We smell her. She was a dinner lady, so you had a mix of perfume and chip grease. You'll wake up in the morning and smell that, and we see her ornaments that we inherited move across the table on their own, and it's quite an interesting house to live in. So again, all this thing is what interested me in this field. Then as I got older, life took over, so you have to get a job, you get a girlfriend, and you worry about paying the bills and keeping a roof over your head. So the day-to-day research and the day-to-day interests just fall by the wayside. However, I had a very unfortunate accident playing rugby, and it left me in a wheelchair for 3 months, and I had nothing better to do than to just sit at home researching. So I discovered programs such as Ancient Aliens and other programs that got me back into the, you know, and you know how it is, you go on YouTube, you want to find out how to bake bread, and then the next thing you know, 9/11 was an inside job, and you go from one video to the next 3 days later. So around that time, I had a very unique UFO experience. So this is a place near myself, so I live in Dudley, in the Black Country, and this is in a place called Romsley. So if you want to get on Google Maps and type Romsley, you can find this place. So myself and my brother were coming back from rugby training the one night. It was around about 9:45, and we were travelling down this road here from a town called Bromsgrove. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Bromsgrove. But so we come from Bromsgrove down towards my town of Halsowen. And as you come up this hill here, about here you have the M5. So you're always aware that there's a motorway there, bright lights, loud traffic noises. So when we saw a bright light out of the corner of our eye, we thought nothing of it, we thought it's just the motorway. As we started getting further up the hill, the bright light, it became apparent that that wasn't the motorway, it was something else. When you get to about here, as you can see, it's just farmland. It opens up where there's no trees by the side of the road, and you can see for miles all the way over to the other side of Birmingham. It's a great view. So as we got there, we then realised that this light, there were two of them, and they sat at the back of the craft, and it was a triangular craft, and it was about 1,000 feet away and about 1,000 feet up in the sky. And I stopped, slammed my brakes on, and I was like, what the hell is that? And my brother, who was sat next to me, he doesn't believe in this kind of thing, but he kind of sat next to me, and after about a minute or so of watching it, we both started crying. We don't, you know, big macho men just come back from rugby training and now we're crying like babies in the car. And for me, the thing that made us so scared was the silence of the craft. So I don't know if anyone here has had a UFO experience, but you hear that, and you can hear a plane at 20,000 feet or whatever, or a helicopter. This thing was, you know, you could throw a rock at it, and you couldn't hear a thing. It was silence, sheer silence. And it was probably, if I'd have carried on at 30 miles an hour, I'd have left it well behind. So it was a very strange sighting that we saw. So again, it was kind of as we came up here, and as you get to where you can see the view kind of here, so it kind of came from behind this tree. And interestingly, there was no other cars, which there should be. There are pubs on the road and cars regularly come and go, but there were no other cars. It was, you could hit, apart from the hazards flashing, you could have heard a pin drop. And that's what it kind of looked like with the two lights on the back. People have often asked me, oh, was it aliens? And I don't know, because I didn't see any green men or grey men. But it was a metallic craft, I'd guess. Couldn't see any doors, panels, windows. It just looked like a solid object. So when we witnessed this, we went home and we said to my mum and dad, I've just seen a UFO. And luckily, because my brother's not really into it, him backing up my claim made it more believable to my mum and dad, because they would have probably thought, oh, whatever, you know, you want to see it. And it wasn't until I got to bed about 3 hours later, and I lay there still thinking about it, and we shared a bedroom, and I said to my brother, we didn't get a photo. And my brother went, oh yeah. And when people say, why didn't you get a photo, believe me, it was the last thing on my mind. When you're crying your eyes out, staring at this thing, you don't think about getting your phone out and taking a photo at all. And I've had discussions about whether whatever was operating the craft have the ability to make you not want to take a photo, or, you know, and when people do take a photo, they're always the worst photo kind of quality you could get. So that's maybe something to think about. But after I saw this, it then set off this huge kind of synchronicity in my life that made me get into this field a little bit more. So I reported this UFO experience to a guy called Antonio Paris, and he's American based, and he put me in touch with a guy called Lawrence McNeil, who's based in Scotland, and he was the UK investigator for any sightings in the UK. So he took me on, and regularly we would have Skype calls and phone calls and whatever, emails, to talk about this while he documented my case. And the one day I said to him, I can't talk for long because I'm going to a lecture. Any of you ever heard of Bufog? Or Dave Hood? Yeah, so that's my local place. So I was going there to watch a lecture, and he said, okay, that's fine, I'm going out as well. And I said, okay, where are you going? He said, I'm going to watch a lecture. I was like, oh, so am I. I'm going to watch one on 9/11. He went, oh, so am I. I was like, oh, okay, where are you going? He said, well, my sister's married to a guy from Birmingham, and he's got me tickets to this local place that are doing a lecture on 9/11. And about an hour after that, I was stood at the bar having a drink with this guy, who I'd never met before, and only really, you know, bumped into each other over Skype 3 weeks before. And it's when things like that happen that you have to take notice of what the universe, I guess, is trying to tell you, and think, right, I'm on the right path. So then it was going to Bufog regularly, mixing with those kind of people that got me into this kind of world again, thankfully. Then my wife took me on a paranormal investigation at our local castle, Dudley Castle. Call it a castle, I guess. It's just some ruins, really. So we went with a well-known now national group, and it was okay. I didn't know much about it. I'd watched Most Haunted like most people, and I knew what the little tools did, and it was fun. But that's all it was. It was fun, and they made sure it was fun because we paid a lot of money to go. And we left, and I thought, I like that. Let's go on another one. So we kept going, and Eventually she stopped coming because she doesn't like it. She's only here now because I brought her away for the weekend. And eventually I went from group to group, ones I didn't really like, which I'll go into later, and then I found a group that I did like, and I liked how they investigated, I liked how they questioned things, I liked how they went about the investigations, and luckily, without me really asking, they asked me, do you want to become part of the team? And I didn't have to think twice, it was like, yes. So that was a great day for me, and then I could officially call myself a paranormal investigator. And that's kind of up to now, that's kind of my brief history. So, when I started investigating the paranormal, around that time, I then got into a guy, he's not that well known, David Icke. And he fascinated me. He kind of really broadened my horizons. And apart from the paranormal, my other biggest interest is the nature of reality and why we perceive the world as we do and how we perceive it and why and how we exist, basically. So it's things such as this. I don't know if can you all read that? Yeah. So the human eye can only see between 430 to 770 terahertz. Our ears can only detect sound between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz. So it's these ranges that make up only a fraction of the light frequency and the sound frequency. So to put it a little better, that is all we can see within the light spectrum. That's what we call visible light. And people say roughly about 0.05% of the light spectrum we can see. So you can see we've got radio, microwave, infrared, and then the wavelengths get smaller for ultraviolet, X-ray and gamma ray. So all of that outside of this little fraction we can't see. We develop tools that allow us to see it, such as X-ray machines and infrared torches and ultraviolet torches that allow us to see what's existing. But with our human eyes and our human ears we can't sense any of this. So if that's the case, I then began to think from a paranormal point of view, well, could it be that ghosts are existing in these frequencies outside where we are? So how many times have people probably here seen a ghost or a UFO and it's there 1 minute and then it goes? And so I came up with a theory and I use a radio analogy. So I talk about frequencies to a radio. So when you're listening to, let's say, Radio X, that doesn't mean that Radio Y no longer exists. You're just not tuning into that particular radio station. It's still there, you're just not tuning in. So then you want to listen to Radio Y, Radio X doesn't cease to exist, you just change your frequency. So is it possible for people like mediums and psychics that they can listen to Radio X and Radio Y at the same time? And that's why they can see ghosts or hear ghosts that we can't. We just can't tune into those frequencies. So if you think about when you're driving in a car, you've had two radio stations. Have you ever had it where they kind of cross over and you start to hear two songs jumbled up at the same time and then it goes back to normal? That could be what happens when you see a ghost, or people see Bigfoot, or I don't know, the Loch Ness Monster, or anything that kind of these cryptoids could be all existing on different frequency ranges that we just can't see. So I use a block of flats as an analogy. So if we're all living in a block of flats and we all live on one floor in the frequency range that we live in, you know that someone lives above you because you see them every now and then, you hear them every now and then, and you might bump into them in the lift once a month. But you can't interact with them because they're on a different floor. And that could be what's happening here. So we could have Bigfoot living on the top floor, we could have aliens living on the bottom floor, we could have ghosts living just above us. And that could, basically an analogy for all these different frequencies where these beings could be existing. And that's why when we use things like EVP recorders and we use things like infrared cameras, we see things on those that we don't see with our human eyes because they're operating on different frequencies. So it was those questions then that kind of got me into looking at the paranormal investigation differently to how Yvette Fielding does on Most Haunted, which is just screaming and running around. And of course different animals can see things that we can't see. So we know that cats can see infrared, we know that snakes can see infrared, and they can see things that we can't see. There's just a fun little picture there. This will be for you, Dawn. So yeah, I've often had family dogs that will just sit and stare into the corner of a room and follow something that we can't see and then start growling at something that's not there. Ever had that where your pet's just going mad and you don't really know why? So we come on to the TV popularity. So I guess you've heard of all these programmes, probably watched them for your sins. So my favourite one is the My Ghost Story. Has anyone ever watched that? Yeah, I love this programme because what it does is it shows real people with what we assume is real evidence. and it's so they've got EVP recordings and photos and things like that, and it's just got a little bit more normality to it than the other programs. So I started to watch Most Haunted, God, when I was about 11 or 12, something like that, and it was great, and I used to watch it with my dad, and my dad used to go, "It's rubbish," and I'd say, "No, it's not." And then YouTube came along and started to prove to me that most of it was fake. You can see things happening, and people were circling where one guy was kicking a bucket over and telling you, "Did you see the bucket fall over?" So then again, I began to think about this. Why? Why are they doing this? You know, I've had enough experiences to know that it's true. Why can't they just present the truth? And then it dawned on me, well, they need you guys to be entertained in order to keep a job. Because if you tune into a 45-minute programme, they're not going to keep you entertained if they show 45 minutes of what most paranormal investigations are, sat in the dark, trying not to fall asleep. That's basically what I do on a weekly basis. You sit in the dark, you occasionally hear a knock or a tap, and you think, "What was that?" No, it's gone. And then you try not to fall asleep again. So they will probably do investigations similar to us. They'll go for 5, 6, 7 hours, and then they condense all of what they've found into a 45-minute programme. So if they've not found enough to fill a 45-minute programme, there's a possibility they then become tempted to fake a little bit to keep you entertained, because otherwise you're not going to watch it again next week. And if your viewing figures drop, they lose their job and they don't get paid their handsome salary. Unfortunately, this kind of behaviour has now come down to the amateur groups that operate around the country. So there's probably now 3 or 4 that I could reel off the top of my head, but not to name names, of groups that run the country now in terms of paranormal investigation. And just like these guys, they rely on your entertainment. So they charge 2 or 3 times more than what your amateur groups will charge, and they ensure that you have a good night. And they make sure you see things, and they make sure you feel things. And what happens is when people like these, and people like these amateur groups, when they become so reliant on repeat customers, and so reliant on making money, and needing you to be entertained in order to keep them in a job, then their reliability, I think, decreases. Because now they're not concerned about finding the truth and finding evidence, which I'm sure they set out to do to start with. But now they're more interested in keeping you coming back and paying their wages and keeping them going as a group. I'm not saying everything that they've ever found is fake. I'm just saying we really have to question them, because their motives are completely different to what your guys' motives would be if you went round a friend's house to try and find a ghost. So just always bear that in mind. So is it real or fake? I don't know. Some of it's real, some of it is clearly fake. You can see it on things like YouTube and stuff. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to... Oh, by the way, if anyone's got any questions, please just throw your hand up, because there's nothing worse than waiting for an hour and forgetting what it is you want to ask.
I'll just quickly ask you one.
Yeah, sure.
What do you think of Ghost Adventures?
Again, I think it's okay. I think...
Is it real or fake? What do you think?
I think it sits with the rest of them. I think they all start out with fantastic intentions, as we all do. I think they all start out like they want to... You know, and these guys, it's not... They didn't become ghost hunters to get on TV. They were ghost hunters before. TV have clearly approached them to set up a programme for them. And I think it's when that happens you begin to see their reliability decrease. I don't think it's Ghost Adventures, but Ghost Hunters. They started off really good. I quite liked them. And I used to watch Ghost Hunters International, which had Barry Fitzgerald in, who I like. I've got some of his books. And then they did a live show where the one guy clearly pulled his own jacket and went back, and you could see it all happen in one swift movement. And there was even one of their team members kind of put his head in his hands, and as if to say, "Oh God, did he just do that?" Because it was a live show, they couldn't cut it out. It's all on YouTube for you to go and see. So I think the reliability of them, they start out with great intentions, but just be careful about what they say and the
Anything
evidence.
to do with Edinburgh, that's what I like, with the ghosts.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
Got any Edinburgh?
I've never been to Edinburgh. I've never been to Scotland. This is the furthest north I've ever been. So I'm going to start talking about some equipment now that we use. So this is an EMF meter. I found out this morning that my battery's gone. Great. But it's also known in brackets as a K2 meter. So are you all familiar with this? Yeah? No? Okay. So an EMF meter basically just measures the electromagnetic fields that are around us. And it was originally used by electricians and by technicians who used to fit wiring and microwaves and things like that. And it would just detect if you had a leaky microwave or if you had a leaky wiring in your house. And it would just flash up to red or orange depending on the strength of the leakage. People now use this because apparently ghosts can affect the electromagnetic field around us, and this detects whether they're affecting that's surrounding us. This can be cheated with, and I have seen this done on some of the investigations I've been on. I can't show you because it's not working, but basically if you hold the button down and don't let it go completely, if you've got one at home, try this, and the lights just start flashing like mad. And I remember watching a guy do that, and he was going around, was going, look, it's going mad. And you could see his fun kind of doing that, as you can see mine now. So he was trying to fool us into the K2 was going mad when it wasn't really. So a K2 meter, like I say, it measures the electromagnetic field around us. If you follow my theory that ghosts are operating on frequency levels, this becomes quite an interesting piece of kit. But you also have to remember that it can be affected by wiring and mobile phones and anything else that operates on, even we operate on an electromagnetic field. So you have to be careful that it's not being affected by an outside source that could be giving you false readings, basically. I've got a video here. Have any of you ever heard of the ancient Ram Inn in Gloucester?
I've been to it.
Yeah. So we went there.
I met John.
John, yeah.
I was just on
before he died.
He took me right around.
Yeah,
Gave
nice
a
guy.
donation as
Well, we went just after he died, and the activity there completely dropped after he'd gone. So we think that whatever was there was attached to him. And
he did talk about succubus.
Succubus, yeah.
And all that.
So it's interesting that when he died, it kind of changed. Yeah. So can you remember the room? So there's a room at the ancient Ram Inn. I guess it was the old living quarter. And there's a big open fireplace in the wall. And there's not really much electric going on in there because it's a really old building. We couldn't go in parts because it was unsafe. And we did a bit of a K2 experiment there where we were all sat in a circle. And let's see if I can make it play. Great. So you'll start to see the lights flash in a second, which will show you what these do. See? So what we were doing here is we were asking questions, can something come and interact with the K2 meter? And on command, it started to make the lights flash, as you can see. So we found this really interesting, and at the time we'd got one there, and we'd got another one on a chair that was forming part of our circle. And what started to happen was, when that one wasn't flashing, the other one was. And so we said, well, can you make the other one flash? And they were taking it in turns. And it was almost like, if you can imagine a little child maybe running between them, playing a little game with us. So we found that quite interesting. So then what we did was we put the two next to each other. If this will show. There we go. We put the two next to each other just to see if they would react together. And sure enough, they did. So I walked around with my own this night, back when it was working, and I didn't get a single thing, not in this room, not in any room, it didn't go once. It only went during this particular part of the night, which I found quite interesting. Because you always try and look for similarities throughout the evening. You know, if something kicks off in one part of the house, you see if it happens again and again and again, and if it does, it's either paranormal or there's something faulty going on there with the wiring. But like I say, this particular area, I don't know if you can remember, but there were no wires or electrics or anything in this area. And now you can see one operating on its own, which is interesting, because if it was electrics, they'd both be picking it up. But they weren't, and you see one's going right the way up to red, where one is kind of stopping at the orange mark. So it's quite interesting. So that's the K2. Now, I've looked into a little bit about EMF. So have anyone ever heard of melatonin levels? What the melatonin is? So interestingly, melatonin is released by our pineal gland, which is our third eye, as some people will call it. So it's situated just about here. And melatonin levels make us want to fall asleep. So light, sunlight, and any kind of light suppresses the melatonin levels within our body. So when we wake up in the morning, we wake up because it's daylight, and our melatonin levels aren't being released into our bloodstream anymore, so we feel nice and awake. When it starts to get dark and the sun goes down and you dim your lights at home, your pineal gland begins to release melatonin into your bloodstream, which makes you drowsy and it makes you want to fall asleep. People have done studies that have shown that EMF has a huge effect on the release of melatonin levels into your bloodstream. So it suppresses the pineal gland in the same way that sunlight would suppress your pineal gland, and it would prevent you from feeling tired. So there was a huge study done, and there was a guy in America who, he was, I think you can find it on YouTube, but he'd moved into a house, and he just had all the wiring done, and he couldn't fall asleep, and he claimed that he got someone sitting on his chest, strangling him, but he couldn't sleep. Someone was in the corner of the room watching him, he was suffering from paranoia, and the lot, you know. He even got a guy coming in to exercise his house. He thought, I've just moved in, what have I done? You know. Anyway, they continued to work on his house, and he had a guy come in to finish the wiring, and it found out that he'd done it all wrong, and he'd got huge amounts of EMF leaking from his wiring, and they had to rip it all out and start it all again. The second they'd fixed his wiring, his house was exercised, and he never saw the guy stood in the corner of his room again. He could sleep perfectly, and he never had any pressure on his chest ever again. So it's possible, well, it's probable, that what was happening was the EMF flooding his house was affecting his sleep and his melatonin levels. And as we all know, if you don't get enough sleep, you begin to see and hear things that aren't really there, and you get a bit ratty and a bit irate. And this is what was happening to him. So you always have to think about these things. It's never a ghost straight away. You know, as you'll begin to understand as I go on, you always think about whatever possibilities they are before you jump straight to the fact that it's a ghost. So things like 3G, 4G, 5G, all these things that are existing around us now are affecting us, although we can't see them. People have Wi-Fi in the home, they'll sleep with their mobile phones next to their bed. All this stuff is affecting us massively, and it could be making us see things or affecting our sleep. So even if we just stray away from the paranormal, it's just affecting our health on a day-to-day basis in a way that we really need to be aware of, and try our best to change it.
Yeah, especially like now with people having watching computers before they go to bed, and the energy, the frequency range gives off a blue. It's in the blue range.
That's it, yeah. So you can buy like a blue filter for your screen.
Apparently that could be affecting the melatonin levels of the brain. You know how if you've been watching a computer screen for a long time, and you go to bed and you close your eyes, you'll see things.
Yeah.
You know, it takes a while for your eyes to settle down. To get used to, and also
you're right.
It could be a link with people that live close to pylons.
Pylons, yeah.
Because they give off massive electromagnetic field.
Well, I had a friend who lived right next to this huge pylon that they put up, and when they did, about 3 people in his street started saying that their house was haunted, and that they were seeing things that they'd never seen before. So again, it could easily be linked to something like this.
Do you think 2 milligauss long-term exposure is all right? Because they say 2 milligauss is the maximum EMF we should be getting in long term.
But we're getting a lot more than that.
That could be rubbish.
Yeah,
it's just scientists are saying this.
Well, yeah, but who are the scientists backed by? And you have to think about the agenda that they're pushing, and that who's funding their research.
So what you're saying is it could well be.
I think we need to do our. I think we need to do our own research, and I think we need to understand what's healthy for us as individuals. Don't listen, because again, just like for example, my wife can eat chocolate cake all day and she won't gain a pound. I only have to look at a donut, and I'm about 3 stone heavier. So what's good or bad for one person is good or bad for a different person.
Because those pylons, you've got to go about, I don't know, say 50 metres away before you drop down 2
Before it
milligauss.
drops down, yeah.
Anything nearer than that, it's above 2 milligauss.
Yeah. I think again, I know people that have smoked all their life and they die from something completely unrelated to smoking, and I know people that have smoked for 10 years and they get lung cancer. So it's what we're different. What we are is we're all atoms vibrating to different frequencies, and it all depends what frequency we're vibrating to as an individual, and therefore what frequencies affect us. But I'll come on to that later. So again, if you can all read that, this is just basically what I've told you. So what melatonin is. So your internal clock, also known as your circadian rhythm, influences how much melatonin the pineal gland makes, and so does the amount of light that surrounds us. So the levels start to rise in mid to late evening after the sun's started to go down, and they stay elevated for most of the night while you're in the dark. And then as soon as the sun starts to come up, that's why you can get those alarm clocks that simulate sunrise, which is quite nice, because it starts to basically wake up your gland. Hello.
What about people who live in, say, Norway or Iceland?
Yes, where it's dark for
where
like
it's
6
dark
months.
24
Well,
hours
even
or
in this
light
country,
24
we begin
hours.
to suffer from this seasonal affective disorder, and that's because we're not getting the UV from the sun, and we're not getting the things that make us healthy. And I think it's to do with this, to do with the levels of the melatonin in your body, because if you're in the dark for 6 months, it can't be good. And so even in this country, when it gets to winter, I notice it. I get a bit depressed when I'm driving to work in the dark, and I'm driving home in the dark, and everything's dark, and it's just a bit depressing, really. And I think it's to do with your body never really has time to wake up in its natural way. You know, you pull yourself out of bed at 6 in the morning, you down 6 coffees to try and wake yourself up, but you're not waking up naturally. So you're just throwing your body from, from left to right and messing it all up.
It's anti-aging as well, though, melatonin. But I agree, you need the sunshine for vitamin D and other health benefits.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. That's like most of the species on this planet. So that's the EMF meter, the K2 meters. Anyone got anything they want to ask about that before I move on? No? Okay. So, human pendulum. Anyone heard of this?
Yes.
No? Some people have, some people haven't. So when we have a break, if anyone would like a go at this, feel free to come and have a word with me, and we'll probably go out there and we'll have a go. So, human pendulum, so this is one of my close friends, Joe, you can probably just see me, my big head in the background. So what happens with a human pendulum is, it's similar to how we operate a pendulum when we're dowsing, basically. But instead of asking for a spirit to move a crystal, we're asking them to move a human. Which is quite an interesting as well. I don't know if you can just make out that bright white light that's above his head. Found that interesting. So, with a human pendulum, we get them to stand just like that. So nice and relaxed, feet planted to the floor, arms nice and loose, head on their chest. And we tend to just count down from 10 to 1. We don't hypnotise them, we're not Paul McKenna, we just make them nice and relaxed. We've had people snoring, actually. We've done this at like 1:30 in the morning, they've just started snoring. So they were too relaxed. And once they're relaxed, we ask for a yes and a no answer. So we'll ask for a yes answer, and you might see the person move forward, or you might see them move backwards. And then we ask for the other answer, and as you would suspect, they always move the other way. Read into that what you will. Sometimes we get them moved from side to side, which is very rare, but it's quite interesting when that happens. So once we've got a yes and no answer, we begin to ask our usual questions. Are you male? Are you female? Did you die here? The usual questions that you would hear. And we use the person's body's movement to answer our questions. Interestingly, we do this because we go back to the same locations time and again, and we always get different people, and we almost always get the same answers, which I always find interesting, because if it is the subconscious that's answering the questions, and it's not a spirit, how are they all getting the same answers, and the same backstory, basically? So, do you want to ask a question? Sorry, no, sorry. I saw you hang on. So I did this. I participated in this in my first ever investigation down in a place called Drakelow Tunnels. Ever heard of Drakelow Tunnels? Most haunted have started going there now, which means we can't, because the people that run it have more than doubled the cost. Because most haunted throw money at them left, right, and centre, so we can't do it now. So we went down there, and I participated in this, and I got relaxed, and I was stood just like that. And I felt, and most people that do this will tell you, that they felt like they were just stood perfectly straight, perfectly still, not moving at all. Apparently, according to one of the guys, I was doing the Michael Jackson lean. I'm quite a big guy, and it's impossible for me to do the Michael Jackson lean without falling over. As the session went on, we had a REM pod, which is a piece of equipment I'll come to later. That was going crazy, and I was being thrown forwards and backwards. Eventually, I felt this huge smack on the top of my head, which threw me back, and one of the guys behind me had to stop me from hitting the floor. So as you can see, this lady just stood in front of Joe there. That's what we do. We'll have a person in front and behind just to stop them from falling over. Luckily, this guy did. They carried me out of the room, and they asked me, "What's your name?" I didn't know. I thought it was a Wednesday, but it was a Friday. I just didn't know where I was. But all this time, I'd got this grip on my head, and it hurt so bad, like a vice was just gripping your forehead. And when I left the room, this REM pod that was kicking off had stopped. And when we were in the other room, we heard a growl. So this guy was trying to relax me, he was trying to focus me, and from behind we heard this, I'm not going to do it, but we heard a growl. So I've spun round to where I thought it had come from, and this guy was like, no, forget it, just keep looking at me. When we went back into the room, after I'd calmed down a bit, the REM pod started kicking off again, which was interesting. And they'd been doing an EVP session, and they'd picked up hello. And when we worked out the timings, they'd picked up hello at the same time that we'd heard the growl. And this got me thinking, why could we only hear a growl, but the EVP heard hello? So now we go back to frequencies. So our human ears couldn't pick it up, we just heard this growl, and it sounded quite evil, it sounded quite nasty. But on the recording, it was quite an innocent hello kind of thing. So we would have misconstrued it as something evil, when in fact it was just trying to say hello. So that's something else where you think about this thing is operating on a level that we can't, you know, kind of.
Is that quite common, a growl?
We hear growls a lot. We get growls a lot.
But you think it isn't necessarily.
I'm not saying, you know, there might be some people that just want to growl at you, but I don't know why. But I
don't
think
assume it's evil, yeah.
you don't assume it's evil. That's right, yeah. So that's what happens with a human pendulum. Now we also do something similar to this that's called a spirit walkthrough. So it's just like the human pendulum. As you can see here, we've got two people operating here. So Joe's doing it again. He was very active that night, and we have Amy. So we can do this with up to 4 people, 5, 6. You could get a row of people doing it. And the idea with this is we just want to take that experiment of the pendulum just one step further and see if they can use multiple people to answer questions. And what's interesting with this is you'll ask for a yes answer or a no answer, and the people will most of the time go the same way, which is quite interesting. Because again, if it's subconscious, you might think, right, I want to go forward for yes. Whether you're doing it on purpose or not, I'm not saying you are, but subconsciously you could be answering the question. So you go, I'm going to go forward for a yes, but the person behind you go, no, I want to go backwards for a yes. But we always get them going the same way. So it's quite an interesting concept because it just takes that pendulum experiment that one step further. Yeah, so that's a spirit walkthrough, and we have people, like apart from my bad experience, interestingly in the room that I had mine, about 6 months or so later we were down there again, and a family friend of mine had come along who was a complete sceptic. She got a bit of interest in it, but I don't know why, but I think my mum had brought a ticket for her birthday or something. And they came down, and I said to her, do you want to do this pendulum? And she said, yeah, fine, whatever. So we stood her in this room, and after about a minute or so of moving, she started to shake like she was having a seizure, and there were a couple of women in there that started crying because it was quite a scary thing to watch. And she was rooted to the spot and she just couldn't stop shaking. So we had to, you're familiar with grounding, so we had to ground her basically and just try and pour all of our energy into her to calm her down. We half carried her out the room and she was okay. She couldn't remember any of it. She thought she was stood still. She could vaguely hear the questions being asked in the background, but she doesn't remember shaking or having a fit. And that was in the same room that I'd had mine. So it was, again, interesting when stuff like that happens. So any questions on the spirit walkthrough or the human pendulum? If anyone wants to go with this, like I say, just come and ask after, and we can have a go.
Interesting to watch you doing that.
Yeah, but like I say, we'll find some space, maybe in another room where there's no chairs, and we'll try it. Because for me, I don't know if you've noticed, but I do look at this from quite a sceptical side, and it fascinates me because there's so much of the subconscious that it could be, and it might not be a spirit. But when you get multiple people, different people, do it on different nights, and they give you the same answers, the chances there become quite slim.
Have you been in a situation where you think you're being scared, absolutely petrified? Like it's sort of thrown you off scent, and you...
I think that one where I got hit on the head, because that became like physical abuse.
What do you think it was?
I don't know. I think it was energy. I think it was
telling you to stop, or
no? I think whatever hit me was responsible for me moving, and I think he was kind of getting a bit too forceful, and I think he went, "You're going backwards."
Hey, was it someone?
We found out that it was a doctor called Ted. We've since found that out. Not a nice man.
So he was actually in that room at the
Not
time?
this one, the one in Drakelow Tunnels where I went.
What's that place?
Drakelow Tunnels.
What's that?
It was a Cold War nuclear bunker, and it's in Kidderminster, isn't it? So Kidderminster,
Right,
like
a lot of
Worcestershire.
activity there, was it?
A huge amount. like I said, Most Haunted, I think they've got a TV programme where they're down there, but it's a huge amount of activity. You've got 5 miles worth of tunnels. You're about 400 feet underground at the deepest point, and the tunnels are so wide that you can get 2 Arctic lorries side by side up some of them. It's huge.
People died down there.
Yeah, people died. People had accidents when they were digging it out, building it. A lot of Irish people would have died down there.
Really? How old is it?
It was going to be used as a nuclear bunker for the Cold War,
Yeah.
but I know that Rover stored a lot of parts in there during the war, and there's rumour that there's a secret tunnel that runs from there to Lungbridge, where the Rover factory was. But of course, that would be miles.
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure about that. But they've started to section it off now, and there's bits that are used for escape rooms, and they're turning bits of it into a museum, which is good. So it's an interesting place to go if you can ever get on a ghost tour down there. Just expect to pay a lot of money.
Is it important for people to keep their eyes shut
Whilst
when
doing
they're
this?
that?
I've seen people with their eyes open. I've seen people just talking while doing it, going, "Whoa, I'm moving," kind of thing. But we do encourage them to have their eyes shut, just to relax as much as possible.
Would you have the room in light or dark?
Well, that's quite light, because what you can see there is these are just emergency lights that we can't turn off. And normally what we do is we cover them with bin bags or something just to try and darken the room a bit. But we didn't that night.
So the darker the better?
Not really. Again, we'll do it in day. As we were talking about last night, ghosts don't only come out to play at night time. It's just that our other sense is heightened in the dark, so we begin to pick up on other things that we might not pick up on in the day.
I suppose if you put blindfolds on them when you do several human pendulums, and you're still getting the majority going one way.
Well, one thing we're doing now is we're putting headphones on them as well, so they can't hear what we're saying.
Yeah.
So if we say, give us a yes answer, and they still move, but they can't hear you, that's even more interesting, because they're something else is reacting,
as long as you're
moving
not
them for you.
putting stuff on them to interfere with their subconscious.
No, so we tend to put headphones that's just playing some music.
Yeah. So that adds mathematical probability, especially if you've got a good...
If you've got a group of people,
mathematical probability to say that's not...
That's what I mean. So when we take the step up from the single person to the 3, 4, 5 people doing it, when they start to answer questions, then the mathematical, as you say, probability of that happening becomes quite slim, and you have to start thinking outside the box. There, what could it be? Okay, cool. So another thing that we tend to do is psychic handwriting. Have you heard of automatic handwriting, as it's also known? Yeah. So again, there's myself, sat with my blindfold on. I actually have fallen asleep doing this. So again, has anyone ever done this? Ever tried it at home? Sat at home? It's quite an interesting thing to do. It'd be quite similar to what Carol does later, in a way.
Have you heard of Matthew Manning?
No.
Right. He goes back to the 70s.
Okay.
And he was one of the big advocates of automatic writing. And there's other people as well, but he was kind of...
There are famous musicians that claim that they've had whole albums written because they've been using this. And even Charles Dickens came through to a guy called Thomas Porter. So about 3 years after Charles Dickens died, he supposedly got a book that he hadn't finished. And he chose this guy to channel through and finished this book. I can't remember what it was called, but finished the book for him. And I don't think he did very well. So maybe he wasn't as good a writer after he died. But yeah, so there are famous accounts through history of automatic handwriting.
Because there's certain bands in the past I've read about, and they've actually had massive hits in the words, and the people have asked them, well, where do the words come from? They said they don't know. There's one person in particular who wrote something really famous, and he said he was out for the count, and the next day all the handwriting was just there in front of him.
Yeah. There are people that have used. I think it might be. It's not the Who or Led Zeppelin, but it's a big band like that. And they claim to get some of their lyrics from a spirit board. So they conducted the spirit board.
Actually, Lemmy, he said he woke up and he said that it was actually called whatever, and he just said it was just... And if you read that, I'll tell you, but if you read the lyrics, they're absolutely insane, very accurate and brilliant.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept.
But he said he didn't write it, it was there in front of him, black and white, when he woke up.
What I find interesting about this is, again, the potential to manipulate the human mind. into writing something.
But is that not dangerous though? If you can it sort of lead on to other things?
I don't mean manipulation in that sense.
No, but they can manipulate the human spirit to do things.
If the spirit can manipulate us to do it, then that becomes dangerous.
Though,
because it's a form of possession.
Yeah,
I guess. And so then people that will, I don't know, go into a school and shoot people or whatever.
Mind control.
You have to question: are they being manipulated by something?
Yeah.
What I find links closely to this is what's called the Ideomotor Phenomenon. So this is where our body will have movements that we don't know we're doing, but subconsciously we are. So an unconscious or involuntary bodily movement made in response to a thought or an idea rather than to a sensory stimulus. So you don't move because you know I want to move that arm like that. It will just happen. So I did this. The guy you just saw doing that pendulum, Joe. We did an automatic handwriting session, and throughout the day I kept saying this name to him, it was Emma, and I kept saying Emma. Just not so he got suspicious, but I just kept dropping the name Emma into conversation throughout the day. And then when we got onto our investigation, I kept saying the name Emma. So, can you remember Emma from school? And I saw her the other day, and didn't your mum know an Emma? And just like that. Anyway, when it came to doing the handwriting, he put his blindfold on, and about 5 minutes later, we all went to look at what they'd written, and he'd written Emma. And I said, why? And he went, I don't know. And it's because, I think, I planted that name into his head throughout the day, and so it was on his mind, and he'd written Emma. So again, we have to be careful when we're writing or seeing messages or patterns that it's not just our subconscious that's doing it. So again, it's not always a spirit. So it's not always a ghost. No. But it's interesting to watch from a psychological point of view. You have to think why are they answering like that. So who actually wants to do it?
I want to have a go.
You want to have a go?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Are you okay with filming your calling?
That's okay, because I was feeling something.
Right,
okay,
yeah,
right,
go
so
on.
I feel as if there's something for this.
Because they're sat there if you face that way. Okay. Can I have two ladies, one in front and one behind, just for her safety, really? So as long as you can put your arms out and stop her from falling, you're close enough. That's it, yeah? Okay, but just give her enough room to be able to move. Okay, so if you just maybe put your feet a bit wide, that's it. Rest your chin on your chest. That's it, and just arms nice and loose. Okay, so we can just try and be as quiet as possible. Right, so just try and relax, and I'm going to count down from 10. So just focus on my voice, don't focus on anything else that's going on around you. I will be moving around while I'm talking. So, 10, 9, just focus on my voice, 8, 7, keep your breathing nice and deep, 6, 5, 4, make sure your arms are nice and relaxed, 3, 2, keep focusing on my voice, and 1. Okay. So if there are any spirits in here with us now, whether they're with the room or whether they're with the person that's come in, could you please show me a yes answer, please? Thank you very much. And can you show me a no answer, please? Show me a no answer, please. Can you make that a little bit clearer for me, the no answer, please? Make it a bit clearer for me. Thank you.
That's it.
Right. Are you here with this lady now? Are you attached to this lady? Are you attached to this lady? Yes, okay, thank you. Were you related to this lady? Yes, okay. Were you her mother? Make it a bit, just be nice and steady with her, please. Nice and steady. Thank you. Were you her mother? No. Okay. Were you her father? Her father? Yes. Okay, thank you. Do you follow her everywhere? Are you always with her? Yeah. Okay. And do you let her know that you're here? Does she sense you? Nice and gentle, be gentle. Okay. So has anyone else got any questions they want to ask? I don't know if some people have just burning questions in their heads that they would like to ask. Anyone? No?
I can see a pronounced aura right the way around that.
Yeah, if anyone wants to be taking pictures or filming this, please carry on. If you'll pick stuff up on cameras that you can't see with your eyes.
And there's another head just to the right.
Okay. You notice how she's just moving without us asking anything. She's got that sway going, which is quite interesting.
Is he alone?
Are you here alone? You here alone? No.
No.
Okay, thank you. Are you with other family members? Is it other family members? I think that's her nose seems to be.
No. With the soul group.
You what, sorry?
Could it be with the soul group?
Are you with a soul group? No. Okay. Are the other spirits here attached to the building? Are they attached to the building? No. Okay. Are they attached to other people in this room? Ah, okay. So some of you have got people with you. Okay. Are they all relatives of these people?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Be steady. Take it easy. Nice and gentle. See how you have to wait for them to reset almost, because sometimes their movements can just get a bit too much. Has anyone got any other questions I'd like to ask?
Has Pauline seen you recently? Yeah. Pauline's very psychic.
Yeah. Any other questions? I'll start.
Oops.
Yeah. Oh, you okay? You okay?
Yeah, that was a big push.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you feel it?
Yeah, God. Wow.
See, what would normally happen is we'd just count back up from 1 to 10 really, and just wake them up and relax them.
I thought I was going to be back. I think it was your dad, Pauline.
Yeah, he's been very close.
Have you seen him recently?
Oh, I see him all the time.
Oh, that's all right, because that's one of the questions we asked.
Right. God, I felt as if you had pushed us.
So it's an interesting concept. So I don't know if we've got time. If anybody else would like to try a walkthrough, does anyone else want to volunteer? If we can get 3 people, maybe.
Walkthrough.
Through so that they can move, so you're not kind of in their way. So I don't know if you want to kind of and just watch her as she begins to look like. Try not to touch them if you can help it though, because you might kind of wake them. Okay, so if you can all just, again, if you're participating, just legs kind of shoulder width apart, arms nice and loose at your side, drop your head down to your chest, just put your head on your chest. Okay, and if you just kind of focus on my voice as I walk around you, try and ignore the people that are stood close to you. Okay, so we're going to count down now, so 10, 9, 8, try and relax, 7, 6, just focusing on my voice, 5, 4, relax those arms, 3, 2, 1, nice and relaxed. Okay. Spirits, if you're in this room, can you come towards my voice, please? Can you come towards my voice? Move towards me. Spirits, come towards my voice. Thank you.
Arthur's moving.
Anyone that can see them moving. So
Just Arthur.
Just tell me what they're doing. Spirits, could you move away from my voice, please? Spirit, move away from me.
Oh. Rhonda.
Nice and relaxed. Spirits, can you come towards my voice, please? Spirits, come towards my voice. And move away from my voice, please. Thank you. Right, the spirits that are here now, so you've got multiple people that you're interacting with now. So take it nice and easy, please. Can you show me your yes answer, please? Show me your yes answer. Okay, can you show me your no answer, please? Show me your no answer, please. Make it nice and clear for us all to see. No answer.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Is there just one spirit interacting with us? Is there just one of you?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Is there two spirits interacting with us? Yes. So there's two of you. Thank you. Can I ask the spirits, please, that just one of you use the people at a time so we don't get multiple answers, please? Are you a male?
No.
Okay, so you're male. Okay. Is this the same spirit that I was talking to before?
No.
Are you the same spirit? Thank you. That's it. Nice and relaxed. Take it easy. Can we talk to the other spirit, please? We've spoken to you. Can we talk to the other spirit, please? Hey, we. Can I just ask the other spirit to step forward? Can you tell us if you're a male? Okay, thank you. And are you related to anybody in the room? So we seem to be getting conflicting answers, so can we just take one of you at a time and just use the people to answer, please? Just one of you at a time. Are you related to anybody in this room? Okay. Are you attached to the building itself? Are you here with the building?
That's a no.
Has anyone got any questions they want to ask?
Are you a child?
Yeah. That's a yes. That's a yes.
That's a no. No, yeah. We're getting a yes and a no. Are you playing with us? Are you having fun and games? No. No. You said yes.
Yes, that one's a yes.
Has anyone got any other questions, and I'll start wrapping it up?
No.
Any burning questions? Okay. Right, if you're participating, can you just focus on my voice, please? I'm just going to start counting back up from 1 to 10. So, 1, 2, 3. Start moving your hands and your fingers. 4, 5. Start loosening your feet away from the floor. 6, 7, 8. Lift your head up. Lift your head up. 9. Open your eyes. And 10.
Whew,
you okay?
well done.
Because you were the slowest to respond out of everybody. The reason I ask for bodily movements is because there are times where people don't respond because they're still in a state. Yeah. So I just like to make sure that they can actually hear what I'm saying.
Okay, everybody fan watered?
Yes, thank you.
Yep, okay, we'll go to the second part of Kieran's talk. And, and with the floor that overgoes. Thank you, Kieran.
Thank you. Before I move on to the next slide, I thought we'd talk a little bit about scrying. Because Maureen's been very kind enough to bring a scrying mirror. Yeah, probably make it easier.
You can't see it now.
They can. Can you all see that still, yeah? See that? Okay, so this isn't mine, this is Maureen's. So what's interesting about this one is it's not really a reflective surface in such that we know a mirror to be. It's quite dark and quite big. I imagine they've just put, you can see where they've put the film over it to look like a tint. So has anyone ever tried scrying, or they're familiar with what scrying is? No? Some people have. Okay, so scrying, for those that don't know, doesn't necessarily have to be done in a reflective surface. I mean, feel free to pass this around and have a look. It doesn't necessarily have to be done in a reflective surface. People used to scry in ancient times by the smoke that would emanate from a fire. They'd see if they could see patterns. And it's a form of divination, really, so people would look for patterns in tea leaves or things like that. The modern form of scrying has kind of come from the fortune teller that looks into a crystal ball, as we see in the media and Hollywood and programs and stuff. You got a crystal ball, yeah. So again, that's a form of scrying. I kind of, without really knowing it, I took part in scrying by doing what's called eyelid scrying. So this is when, if anyone here meditates and you've got your eyes closed and you begin to see patterns on the inside of your eyelids, or you might see images, that's what's known as eyelid scrying. I didn't know it was a real thing. However, from a scientific point of view, there's a thing called a phosphene, and what that is it's your retina that uses, again, for a form of frequency and a form of light. It hits the particle of light in our world, and it's what forms the images that we see. So when we close our eyes, it's the phosphenes are trying to still hit what we're seeing, but because your eyes are closed, there's nowhere for them to go. So when you see these flash of lights on the back of your eyelids, it's basically just these phosphenes that are kicking off on your eyelids. So it's possible that when you're seeing patterns and images, that it's just your body function, basically. So it's nothing paranormal. However, I've seen like lions and tigers. Lion is my thing to see a lot of when I meditate, a lion, which is interesting. So scrying, what we tend to do on an investigation is we use something similar to that. We've got like a little mirror, and we will either hold it in front of us, or if we're lucky enough to be in a location where there's a mirror on the wall, we'll just use that one. And we put a torch beneath our face, because again we're conducting it in the dark. So we put a torch beneath our face and we'll just stare at ourselves in the mirror. The problem I find with this from a team point of view is it's quite non-inclusive for the whole team. Because if you've got one person staring into the mirror, you might have a couple of people that are near that can see, but the rest of the group can't really participate and they get a bit bored and they wander off. So we tend to do it if there's a small group of people, and we limit it to a couple of minutes per session. Now, if you can imagine it being dark and you're shining a torch underneath your face as if you were telling a ghost story around a campfire, it would distort your face a little bit, and you'd start to see shadows beneath your eyes, and you'd start to see, you know, all your wrinkles that you've got or whatever, not that any of you have. You'd start to see the light reflecting on your face in ways that would distort your mind and make you see things that aren't actually there. So again, it's just something you have to bear in mind when you think, I look a lot older than I normally do. It's just the light and the way it's playing on your face. However, we have had people do it and they have claimed to see that their face is changing into an old lady, even though it be a male that's doing it. And this has been backed up by other people that are there watching. We even had one guy say he was turning into an old lady, while the person next to them said, oh yeah, I can see that you're wearing a bonnet on your head, which was very interesting. But again, you have to think about the power of suggestion. So if somebody says, I think I look like an old lady, before you know it, everyone in the room is agreeing with you that yes, you look like an old lady. And they're not doing it on purpose, they're just doing it because it's the way the mind works, it's the power of suggestion, and all of a sudden everybody thinks, yeah, I can see that, she looks like an old lady. But it's certainly an interesting thing to try on your own. You know, if there's a couple of you, or if you're ever here, and just have a go and see what you see. And it doesn't have to be in the dark, you can use the light now, and you can look into it and see what you see. And we also have people that have seen the background change in the mirror. So they don't change, but they'll say that there's a doorway behind them where there isn't. Or they'll say that they can see other people moving around behind them in the mirror, but in the real world there's actually nothing moving around.
Looking in the mirror as you're looking at it?
Yeah, so if you look in the mirror, so if I looked in the mirror now, I'd see this,
Right.
What they're saying is, oh, there's a doorway there, and you know, 3 people have just walked past me, even though we can clearly see no one's walked
So you
past them.
you get the scrying glass, put it there, and you put it.
So let's say it's just fixed to the wall like so,
Yeah.
and you just put the torch underneath. If you're doing it in the dark, you need the torch. But if you're doing it like now, you can just stare at yourself and see what you see. And it's almost like there's another world existing within the mirror that we can't see in our world.
Apparently that's what John Dee was. Do you remember the Elizabethan magician? John Dee.
No, I wasn't around.
John Dee he was into scrying glass. I'm just telling you, I just thought I'd mention it.
No, I'll look into that.
Yeah.
I think the problem for me is, I don't know if you've ever tried it, I've probably got too much time on my hands, but I have been, you know, kind of having a shave or whatever, and I'll just stare at myself in the mirror, and I'll stare and I'll stare and I'll stare, and after 3 or 4 minutes, you don't recognise yourself anymore, and you begin to think, is my forehead really that big? And you know, have my eyebrows always been like that? And what your mind begins to play tricks on you. So if you're doing that in the dark with a torch shining on your face, you're going to see things that you've never noticed before, and you might think that it's paranormal when in fact it's not. However, people that have seen the whole world and the whole image change behind them in the mirror is very interesting, and it's certainly worth doing if you want to, you know, have a little play.
That would be hallucinations, or if you were staring and...
Yeah, if you stare long enough,
else,
absolutely.
yeah, it's a hallucination.
Yeah, I agree.
Is it
so
a
it's just,
portal? Is that what it is?
well, I don't know, because I mean, I've experienced, I guess, what we would call a portal. So again, down in Drakelow tunnels, if ever you get the chance to just Google some images, it's fascinating. And they've got like these big open spaces with these big walls. And I remember the ones it was me and a lady just staring at this wall, and we started to get purple flashes kind of happening. So again, you think, well, it's dark, we're kind of staring into the darkness. Is this just our minds playing tricks? And then she said, what can you see? Because we never give each other, we don't like the power of suggestion. So what we tend to do is, what can you see? And I say, well, I can see something. So on 3, and we'll go 1, 2, 3, and we'll both say what we can see. She said door, I said window, so close enough. And what we could see was people moving. This was just on a wall, but all of a sudden there was this, I say window, and there were people moving in past this window, like a train station. If you were watching through a doorway into a train station, you can see people moving along the platform. And we could just see people moving, but there was no one there. We were in these tunnels, you know, on our own. And we saw a doorway or a window, and it was almost like it was into another world, into another dimension, into another frequency. And these people were just moving around freely. None of them came out of the door. None of them came towards us. They were just all moving past, as if they were on their own little platform. So it's possible that you're seeing into another dimension, another, I would call it frequency, but yeah. So scrying is certainly an interesting thing to do. You don't have to have a mirror, like I say. Try it on the back of your eyelids, try it in the smoke, try it in a cup of tea. People use clouds in the sky, shapes of clouds and things like that.
What about when people have sort of stepped into another era?
Yeah, so
like there's a street in Liverpool.
Is it where they've kind of travelled back in time?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to talk about this later, but we'll bring it forward. So, one of my theories is that when we're communicating with what we would call a spirit, if you believe that time isn't linear, which I don't believe that time is linear, if time isn't linear and therefore everything is all happening right now, so there are multiple timelines, so my great-great-great-grandfather is still alive on his timeline. So when we communicate with someone on a spirit board or whatever, is it possible that they're communicating with us when they're alive, existing in their world? So have any of you ever watched The Others, the film with Nicole Kidman? So they don't know they're dead, and they think that they've got ghosts in the house. And the people that are living, you know, 60, 70 years later think they've got ghosts in the house, and they're coexisting side by side on their own individual timelines, but they don't know they're dead, and they don't know that they've got ghosts in the house. So we watched a programme, myself and my wife, on BBC called The Living and the Dead, and it was about this guy, 1800s, bought a farmhouse and had people working on the farm for him, and he started to see things around his house, and he didn't know what they were. He thought he was going mad. So he saw a lady walking around the house holding what he described as a big white light. What it was his great-granddaughter or something had gone to investigate where her lineage had come from. So she'd gone to this house, and she was like looking for ghosts, to see if she could contact her dead great-grandfather. He'd seen her walking around with a big bright light, which was in fact an iPad, as she was walking around the house trying to communicate with him. And they could sense that they were there. You know, at one point they kind of stood like this, and they, you know, he knows that she's there but he can't see her, and she knows that he's there but she can't see him. And they were kind of, again, coexisting in the same kind of area, but on different timelines, and again, I would argue different frequencies. He then saw a plane in the sky, even though he was living in the 1800s, and he was like, whoa, what's that? Really interesting programme, The Living and the Dead, and it kind of follows this theory that I'm talking about now. So if that's possible, when Maureen talks about people that have just slipped back into the in time and see people walking down the street, it could be possible that what they've done is slipped into this alternate frequency, this alternate timeline, and therefore they're interacting with people that are still coexisting. But you know, you've seen photos, time travel photos, I'm not really into them, but you see someone from the 1930s who looks like they're holding a mobile phone. Have you seen these photos?
Yeah.
Or also, you know, the guy at a boxing match in the 1970s, he looks like he's taking a selfie or something. There's probably a simple explanation for it, but it could be that the same has happened there, but in reverse. So, to argue against my own point, if that's the case, why do we never seem to talk to anyone on a spirit board from the future? If you ever ask them what's the year, they'll always tell you it's 1860 or it's 1925. It's always the past. I've yet to talk to someone who's told me that the year's 2155, for example. So that's kind of like a counter-argument to what I've just said. But it's certainly an interesting theory, and it could explain why people seem to go back in time when they're walking down the street.
It could be frequency as well.
Frequency, yeah. That's what I think it is. I think you basically just your radio has tuned into the radio that you weren't tuned into for the briefest of seconds, and then you've snapped back into your old frequency.
If something tragic happens in a house, do you think the house holds on to those memories and keeps
Okay, so for me, and I know other people describe it the same, there is a difference between a spirit and a ghost.
Yeah.
So for me, a ghost is nothing more than a recording or a memory or an energy that's imprinted on a particular area. A spirit is an intelligent being that can communicate with you, it can touch you, it can answer your questions, and it can let you know
like
that
a higher
it's there. Being. I think it's just an existing consciousness that an energy that is alive and well. Whereas a ghost is, if you go, I know people that go into places like Auschwitz, for example, and they pick up on the habit and go, oh, I don't like it in here. But you know, that's obvious. We all know what happened at Auschwitz, maybe. I'm not going to get into that. But then you can walk into a room and where someone was killed or murdered, and you don't know that, but you kind of feel like, oh, I don't like the energy in here. And it could be that there's been so much heartache or so much something that's happened there that it's kind of made you think, oh, I don't like it in here. And you're picking up on that energy. So if you live in the same house for 40 years, and you get up in the morning, you go downstairs, you make your coffee, you go upstairs, you get changed, you come back downstairs and you go to work. Every morning for 40 years. That has to imprint some form of memory or energy on that building. So when you sit in your house and you see a guy come down the stairs and walk into your kitchen, you think, who the hell's that? You know, and he doesn't take any notice of you, he just carries about his daily business. It could be that that's the memory or an energy that you're seeing of this guy that used to do it for years when he lived there, and he can't interact with you, he doesn't know you're there, he's just existing in his timeline like a tape recorder playing over and over again.
What about people that have practiced the black arts in the past? Say there's a certain house in Scotland, I know, Jimmy Page brought it, and I can't remember his name, but he was...
Alistair Crowley.
Yeah, he was up to God knows what, and this house was absolutely horrendous, and it burnt down in the end, I think. That house like that.
But again, if you're practicing bad energy, and if you're basically pumping negative vibrational energy into a building,
it's going to make it...
It's going to make it bad. So we were just talking in the other room, what you're putting out is what you get back. If you're putting out bad energy and negative energy, that's what you'll get back. If you leave the house in a bad mood, as I do some mornings, then everything that happens that day is going to be bad. Because you think, oh, traffic.
You're putting bad energy in the house.
And you're starting to get it back. If you go out in a good mood, all of a sudden that traffic jam is not that bad. And you know, you dropped a cup of coffee on your desk, and so what? You can just wipe it up.
Can bad energy stick in a house though if it's been there?
I think all energy can stick. I think all
occupants.
Yeah, I think all energy can stick. So you can go into a house and feel happy, and you feel, oh, I like it here. This is quite nice. It's quite a nice space to be in. So to give an example of this, we did a place in Wolverhampton called Gresley Old Hall, and we went into this bedroom, and it had 3 single beds. It was quite a tight room. and I don't know what you ladies call it, like a vanity chair, I guess, where you'd sit and do your makeup and stuff. It was one of those, and it had the stool with a little chest of drawers, and we were all kind of mingling in the room, and I was kind of sat on this stool doing my makeup, and this one guy kept pacing up and down in the room. He'd only a guest, and I said, "Sit down, mate, you're making me nervous." And he said, "No, I can't." He said, "I can't sit down in this room." No. And I said, "Oh, just sit on the bed." He went, "No, can't sit on the bed." I said, "I'll sit on the bed, you sit on the stool." And he went, "Yeah, okay." So he sat on the stool and I sat on the bed. Within about 10 seconds of sitting on the bed, I couldn't stop crying. I wanted to kill myself. I remember saying to someone, "If you gave me a gun now, I'd end it all." Why? And I said, "Well, 'cause there's no hope. It's hopeless. There's no point in living." At the same time that this was happening, another lady who was sat in the door opened the door, and someone said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I can't have the door locked, the door needs to be open." We've since done research and found that there were children locked in the room and sexually abused for years. And so we talk about this energy. So she had to have the door open because the children wouldn't want to be locked in there. And I'd sat on the bed where obviously things had happened, and I'd picked up on that energy, and I felt hopelessness, which I imagine these children would have felt. I wanted to end it all. I felt sad, I was crying. So I picked up on this energy. And it's just a very interesting thing when you talk about, does it still exist? I think it does. So we did an investigation at Oswestry Castle, or Whittington Castle in Oswestry. And this is on the border of Wales. And there's this room, probably about double the length of this, and probably about as narrow. And it's, I don't know what it used to be, well I do now, but it's where they hold weddings now, so people get married in there. So you walk in and they've got chairs all around the outside with an altar down the bottom. So we went in there, and I sat at the one end, I sat on the chair, and I kept shaking and my legs were bouncing and I was rubbing my hands together. And the guy next to me said, "You're all right?" And I was like, "No, I just feel really anxious." You know, when you're ready to take an exam, you know, and you're going to get your results and you think, "Oh, you know, have I passed? And he said, "Well, get up, walk around." I said, No. I said, "If I get up and walk around, whatever I'm anxious about is going to happen, and I can't. I need to just stay here." After 5 minutes or so, he kind of, you know, left me, and I felt a bit okay. So I got up and had a walk around, and I went and sat down the other end of the room, and I sat next to the altar. And I was sat next to the lady. You know, if you do ghost hunt, you have to have someone that's responsible for the building, so she's got the keys, and she makes sure you're not making noise and anything. So I sat next to her, and I said, "I tell you what, I feel like a king. I feel really powerful and almighty, and I feel great." And she said, "Well, look at him." And about 10 yards in front of me, one of the guys was knelt down in front of me. So I kind of shouted over, and I said, "What are you kneeling for?" He went, "I don't know, I just feel like I should be kneeling." And I thought, well, that's interesting. Do that more often. And so then, like I said, I felt really powerful. Anyway, at the end of the night, I said to this lady, I said, "What was it? What was going on in that room?" And she said, "Well, it used to be where the local lord would hold his court and his judge. So what would happen is they would sit at the one end of the room waiting to be brought forward in front of him. So they'd be sat there feeling really anxious, really nervous about what was going to happen. And then they'd go down to the other end of the room where I then sat, where he would sit and pass judgment in front of him. So I was then sat where he would sit, and I felt really powerful. I felt really, ooh, I like this feeling." And what I was doing, I guess, was picking up on that energy again that existed in the room.
In charge, yeah.
Yeah, and at the same time, one of the other guys had really bad stomach pain, and he said, "Did someone not got shot? Did someone get shot in here and die in here?" And no, but someone's appendix had burst, and they had died in there. I think it was around about the 1920s. Their appendix had burst out on the street, and they had to bring them into this room and kind of lie them down and try and sort them out. And they died in the room from a burst appendix. But he had the feeling of having been shot in the stomach. So it's this energy, this empath kind of feeling that you get. So yeah, energy can certainly exist.
Sorry, this energy can be the timeline theory, different timelines theory. I suppose it could also be the magnetic tape type theory, or that's in the walls or whatever.
Yeah, so it's basically just it's imprinted itself on the brickwork. So when people say, "Oh, there can't be anything in here because it was only built 10 years ago," that doesn't matter because it's what stood here before. So it's this particular area that's holding the energy, and that's what we're picking up on. So you hear about the typical ancient Indian burial ground or something that used to be there, but now it's a block of flats. You're still going to pick up on the energy from the burial ground, even though you've put a new building on top of it, because it still exists. But yeah.
Whenever you go into a mansion, you know, a National Trust home, and it has the old furniture.
Yeah,
As soon as you go in, you can feel the energies coming off the furniture, and it's sort of like not evil, negative, just dense.
Yeah.
Because back then it was a lot more dense.
Well, we went to Leicester. They've got a haunted antiques museum where people donate objects because they believe the objects are haunted. So there's the theory that a spirit can attach itself to an object. So it's the energy again toward the object. Right, I'm going to move on then. That was quite a long segment. So here's everybody's favourite. This is normally when I see people run out the door. So that's a spirit board. Recoil with fear. You all okay with that?
The posh one.
It's very nice actually, yeah. I got that for my birthday. They come in different shapes and sizes as Maureen's. I've even seen them come in a little gift shop that big, and it was called a pocket spirit board. And I thought, how would you even operate that? But it's quite cool. So that's the planchette that's used with it. So that's the one that comes with this one. And obviously a lot of people use a glass, an upside down glass. So is everybody use a spirit board? Hands up if you have.
I've got one.
Got one yet? Okay, anybody not? Why?
Just me.
Is there a reason though?
I think, I don't know, I find it a bit frightening.
Okay.
I don't know why,
Okay.
I'm not comfortable.
That's fine. Well, I personally blame the media and Hollywood for a lot of it. And everyone's got a bad Ouija board story to tell.
Yeah,
now, my kind of dealings with my fear on a Ouija board is all that is a piece of wood that someone's drawn some letters on and the spirit is using it to communicate with you. I've seen people cut letters out of pieces of paper, make a circle on the floor, and it has still communicated with them. We've even just used a glass on a table and said, give us a yes answer, and it'll go in a straight line, give us a no answer, it draws a circle. You've got a spirit board. You don't need that. So it's quite controversial because I've got into arguments about this, but I don't think that that is a portal to hell or a gateway to demons and that allow them into the world. It's just a form of communication that a spirit will use in order to talk to you. And they will use that, they will use that, they will use dowsing rods, they will use any way of communicating with you they want. That's just another way that they do it.
Yeah, you can use it with a pendulum, with a grid.
Pendulum, anything you want, and they will use it to communicate. Yes. You do not need the portal to hell in order for them to communicate with you. And I understand that people have had bad experiences. My mum often tells me the story of a lady who was doing, well, a girl who was doing it with her when they were children. She stood up for no reason and ran and smashed through the patio doors and cut herself to pieces, and they don't know why. So yeah, it's a bad experience. But I've had a lot of good experiences with them as well.
The spiritualist churches, people say don't use them because, like they say, oh, it's a portal to hell or whatever. In the old days, they used to say things, spirits of the world, we unite. That is asking any Tom and Dick and Harry spirit to come in. If you ask for only the higher light, good spirits to come through, and I ask for protection from angelic realms, spirit guides, and ensure only the higher light, good spirits allowed in. Then the Ouija.
What we do is we open and close the board at the start and at the end of every session that we do. And it's basically just putting your hands on the board and asking for the beings that are going to communicate with you to come with honest intentions, truth, love and light, basically. There's no specific script, you say what you want, but it's along those lines. And when you close it, you ask that the spirits return to where they've come from, they leave you alone, they don't follow you home, and that they return to, and you kind of end the session. The thing with the spirit board, kind of as you can see there, we're using a UV light. Now you don't know who you're talking to when you communicate on a spirit board. Now you notice I call it spirit board because Ouija is trademarked by Hasbro, the gaming company, because that's all it ever was. It was a game. So Ouija, if you dissect the words, is we and ja, which is yes and yes in French and German, because that's what it was used for, to get a yes and a no answer. So Hasbro trademarked that game. And back in the 1800s it was used as a parlour game where all the posh Victorians would eat their boiled goose and then sit down and play with a Ouija board to see what fun they could have. But what we tend to do is we always use a UV light on it because we believe that the frequency of UV helps deflect negative energy and that negative frequencies can't operate on a UV light. It's quite a common theory that a lot of people follow, this theory. Whereas infrared, people believe, is where negative energy can operate. So you have these kind of combating frequencies. So with a Ouija board, it's got a bit of information on the next slide. So it was introduced in 1890 by Elijah Bond, who had the idea to patent an alphabetized board and planchette. So a planchette is that. Used predominantly as a parlour game, as I've said. It was opposed by the Catholic Church as well as other religious sectors, believing that they have a negative effect on people, such as demonic possession. Is anyone religious here? Great. So they don't agree with that, but they can tell you you're going to burn in hell for eternity, fill you with fear in other ways, but you know they get money from that, but they don't from this. And it became popularised after the US Civil War due to people claiming that they could use the board to contact dead relatives, at a price, of course. And people that had just lost their husband in the Civil War were desperate to talk to their husband, so they'd go along and pay someone who would communicate with their husband, supposedly, and they would charge them. So that's a bit of history on the spirit. Like I say, it is a spirit board. Because if you call it Ouija board, we do it on investigations, and you have people going, I don't want to be in the same room as you when you do it. My mum won't have one in her house. Well, she did for a bit, but she didn't know. So, you know, there's a lot of bad, negative energy that surrounds the spirit board, but not really for me, really. So I've got a video here of one that we recently did. If it plays. I don't know if we've got sound or not.
Do you want the light off?
There you go, I've put a torch on. I don't know if you can hear that. I don't know. That's not part of my video. So she's asking, did you have a mobility scooter? Because this was in my local pub. So you see how fast that glass moves there?
How do you feel about this? Communicating with someone new? Past 2 weeks ago. Ask him how you died. How did you die, Jim? You can spell it out.
So you can hear me prompting the guests what to ask there, because sometimes they're a bit... As you found in there, it's difficult to think of questions to ask when you're in the middle of it. So he spells out heart, so he's basically saying he had a heart attack. When I did this, I knew this guy. I used to watch him park his little mobility scooter outside the pub, come in for a pint and go home. I didn't know he'd died, and he died about 2 weeks before we'd done this. His name was Jim. Now, when we did this investigation, we split into 2 groups, and one group went in the cellar and one group did the spirit board, and then we swapped. We didn't have time to talk. It was literally, they came down, we went up, and we did the spirit board. We both got a name called Jim. We both got that he died of heart failure, and we both got very similar answers to what each other got. And I find that interesting because at no point did anybody plant it into somebody else's mind, oh, by the way, we got Jim. Because what that could mean is they could then subconsciously spell out Jim. Now my problem with that theory, and this is why the spirit board is my favourite piece of equipment, is because it, in my mind, it eliminates all possibility of the subconscious taking over, because you've got multiple people involved, just like the spirit walkthrough that we did in that. So if let's say if we've all put our fingers on a glass, and in my subconscious I want to go to the letter A, for example, but you want to go to the letter J, and you want to go to the letter H. What you'd see is some kind of internal struggle as people argue with themselves. I want to go there, no, I want to go there. But you don't. What you see is the glass like there, it flies across the table. What are the chances that all of us wanted to go? You see how many fingers are on the glass there. What's the chances that they all want to spell out the name Jim? Mathematically, it's very improbable. What's the chances that they all want to spell the word heart? What's the chances that they all want to answer yes to the fact that he rode a mobility scooter? It really eliminates these possibilities, because you've got multiple people all thinking along the same lines. Now, to take that one step further, we did an investigation at a local swimming baths, Smethwick Swimming Baths, and it's a fully functioning swimming baths. You know, when we turned up, there were still staff leaving. And one thing I'll say is, if a house looks haunted, it probably isn't, and if a house doesn't look haunted, it probably is. Sally often gets annoyed with me driving past buildings down the road going, that's haunted, I bet that's haunted, that looks haunted. So we were there, and we were in this corridor. Now while we were in the corridor, there was only myself and another crew member, and he was walking up and down filming, and I was walking up and down asking questions, and we heard a cough, and I know it sounds strange, but it sounds like a female kind of just going clearing her throat. So I've sprinted to the other end of the corridor to see if we can see if it was just a guest who was lost. As I got to the end of the corridor, you turn left and you go to what's like the boiler room, and there's no other way in or out apart from where I'd come. So where we'd heard this cough come from, there was no way whoever it was could have got out unless they'd have come back past us. As I've come back out of the room to signal to my friend, no, there's nothing there, I get right in my ear a really high-pitched whistle, which basically made me sprint up the corridor in absolute fear, thinking, what the hell was that? So we thought, oh, we like this area, so we got a few more people down, and we did some dowsing rods in there, and we did a bit, and we got a bit. And eventually everybody moved away, and I said, right, let's do a spirit board. So it was myself, the same crew member, and a guest stayed with us. We put the spirit board on a windowsill, we were in a corridor, there's not really anywhere to do it. And we all had our fingers on it, and we started asking questions. And this guy said, ooh, I think this is my dad. And I thought, okay. So the sceptic, suspicious side of me thought, right, okay. So I said, take your finger off the glass then, and continue to ask questions. So he took his finger off the glass, and we didn't know who he was a guest. And so we carried on asking questions, such as, what street did I grow up on? What's the name? What's mum's name? What's the name of my eldest son? He asked all these questions, and me and Les answered every single question correctly. But we didn't know him. He wasn't touching the glass. So how did we do that? I can't answer that question. I tried, but I can't answer it. Now, if you believe that it's some form of the Ideomotor effect, which I spoke of earlier, where you're moving without knowing you're moving, fine. But how would we answer all of these questions? So if it's not a spirit moving the board, and it's not the Ideomotor effect, we're now moving into the realms of telekinesis, or some kind of psychic ability that he's sending us the answers and we're answering them for him. So even if it's not spirit, it's just as interesting what it possibly could be. So I don't know how that happens. So we did that another investigation in these tunnels that we go to, and there was a young lady there, and she said, oh, you know, I want to do a spirit board. I said, fine, we'll do one. So there was about 6 of us doing it. And I said to this thing interacting with us, I said, can you take the glass to where you stood? So it flew over to this girl. And I said, do you know the girl? I said, yes. So I said, right, can you take your finger off the glass? So she took her finger off the glass, and she carried on asking questions. What school did I go to? What's the name of my sister? When was my date of birth? And it answered every single question correctly, without her interfering with the glass. She broke down in tears, she got a bit scared, and she left the investigation early, which was a shame. But you know, the guy whose dad we were talking to, he broke down in tears as well. But he said, I came to talk to my dad, and I'm happy that I did. So that was a nice ending. But you can see, it kind of boggles my mind, because as you know by now, I look at everything from a sceptic kind of angle to try and debunk it. I can't debunk it. I don't know what it is and how that happens. And if any of you got any answers, please tell me, because I just don't know. I don't know what it could be. Okay. Right, so has anyone got any questions about spirit board before I move on?
What to do as a glass? I've heard conflicting things. What to do as a glass afterwards?
So when we got the glass, so we'll open up the board, like I say.
Do you break it or do you keep it?
No, don't break it, that'd be expensive, wouldn't it?
No, people just said, I don't know what you do, people.
No, what we open the board, we then turn the glass upside down and put it on the board. And then we do what's called warming the board up, where we just push it. Now what this does as well is it's also like a psychological test, because as you're doing that you can tell that other people are pushing the glass with you, and quite often the glass falls over because someone's trying to push it a bit too hard. And for anyone that's ever done it, you can tell when somebody else is moving that glass, and you can tell when somebody isn't moving the glass. So once we've warmed it up, we then move it back to the centre, we ask for it to answer our questions. Now interestingly, you need to remember, if you're asking this spirit to give you its name, if you're talking to someone from the 1800s, there's a very high chance that they're illiterate, and they would have spelt their name by putting an X or something. So don't get frustrated because they can't tell you their name. But also, if it's a child, it might not know how to spell. So if you're trying to ask what's your name, where did you grow up, you know, what year is it, they probably don't know because they're a young child. So to them it's just a jumble of letters on a board, and they don't know what it means. But also bear in mind that what you're talking to might not always be who they say they are, because we often have guests who try and answer the board for them. So we'll have, let's say it was spelling my name, so it would go K-I-E, and someone will go, is it Kieran? And they'll go, yes. And you don't do that, because you're giving them the answer. and they can play on that then, and they can go with this story that you've almost given them, and it might not be Kieran that you're talking to, or it could be something maybe not so nice. We have a guy who follows us who calls himself Jack. He comes through on the spirit box, which I'll talk about after. He comes through on the board. He's not a very nice man at all. He swears at us, he gives us swear words, nasty swear words over the board. Over the spirit box. We don't know. We've asked who he's with, and he always goes to the same crew member every single time. She doesn't know a Jack, never known a Jack, doesn't know who he could be. He says he fancies her.
So how is he able to like attach to her?
Well, we don't know, because of course she gets a little bit worried now.
Yeah,
and there was the once where she took her finger off the board, because we thought, is she playing tricks on the floor? So she took her finger off the board and it still went around. I mean, we did an investigation, and it's we were talking to an 11-year-old girl called Jackie. None of us clicked. And then all of a sudden, when it spelled out dickhead on the board, we kind of went, is this Jack? And it went, yes. And we're like, oh, hello, Jack. And then the person who said hello, it then spelt out obese woman to her. Yeah, he's not a nice person. He just likes to fool around and play around.
He's not dangerous though.
So we've never had any, like, never been hurt, and she's never had, there's nothing at her house, you know, she says I go home and I don't feel anything at home. He just plays around.
So do you cleanse the glass when you finish?
So what we do is we close the board, and the glass just gets turned back up the other way and gets packed away. We don't do anything with the glass.
How do you close the board?
So when we open the board, we ask for the beings that are going to communicate with us to come in love and light and peace and true intention. And when we close the board, we ask that they stay where they are. They don't follow us. They don't attach themselves to us. And we just thank them for
Because I've never heard any good things about Ouija boards. You know, on Facebook, there's a couple of those for sale, believe it or not, that says not allowed to teenagers.
But then I've just given you two examples of some nice, particularly the guy who spoke to his dad, and he had quite a nice, you know, communication with his dad, and that's all he wanted. I've never had anything. I've had that guy call us names on the board and stuff, but I just laugh. I've never had anything bad, and please don't kind of think that I hold anything against people that think it's bad. That's their opinion, and if they've had bad experiences, then fine. But personally, I've never had anything bad. Yep.
I was telling you about the experience we had with the Ouija board, and this is about 20 something years ago, and it predicted that my dad was going to go into hospital in 2 weeks' time. And when we said, well, what with? It spelt out not pails. So I thought, I didn't even know my dad had pails or didn't have pails. So I told my mum what we'd been doing, and obviously she was frightened, and she made a promise not to do it again, which we basically said, all right, mum, with my fingers crossed. And anyway, in 2 weeks' time, he actually did go into hospital, because I did say to my mum at the time, has my dad got pails? And she said, oh yes. So unbeknown to us, obviously she knew there was bleeding coming from his bottom. What it wasn't pails, it was a burst ulcer.
Right.
Now, that predicted 2 weeks into the future. It also predicted that I would move house a year into the future, and it gave us the date, October the 7th, I think it was. But I didn't even have my house up for sale. And yet it said I was going to move house in 1 year's time on October the 7th.
So what that does, and I know Dawn's got a story about the lottery numbers. So people always ask me, why don't you ask them for the lottery numbers if they can predict the future like so? So we put the word brown into an envelope and asked it to spell what was in the envelope, and we got orange. So maybe it's colourblind, but it was kind of close. And again, something else you could do is you blindfold the people that are operating the board to rule out any subconscious movements, so they know where they're going with the glass. There's loads of ways you can do these experiments and try and eliminate any possibility that they're using the subconscious or that they are just cheating.
I don't know whether it's true or not, there's a thing, it was a documentary, and they said they can actually come through your computer and warn you, they can actually they can get through anything.
Well, the thing is, if they're coming through something electrical, they're using an electrical current, so they're using frequencies. So they're using frequencies, that's all they're doing. Yeah. Similar to the spirit board, which I'll touch on later. So moving on, orbs. Anyone familiar with orbs? Yeah, or dust, or whatever it is. So this is Drakelow Tunnels, and you're about to see some great dancing of mine. So what we've done is we've gone down as a team only, and this is in the kitchen area, and it's a very, very active place. It's where we normally do the spirit board. And this particular area was where the people that used to work and live down there would have all the tables set up, and it was like a canteen, so they'd go and get the food from the kitchen, they'd sit here and they'd eat. So it was quite like an active place. It probably would have been a happy place. They'd have had some music on in the background. And what we did here is we started to play Vera Lynn and all these kind of wartime songs that would have been around at the time. And when we were on the board, we had Vera Lynn on, and I said, right, I'm turning this rubbish off now. And the glass shot over to me. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll leave it on for the 4th time. So we then kind of thought we'd put the music on and see if anybody fancied a dance. And it's a tunnel, we're kicking up a lot of dust, so you expect to see things floating around. But what we pick up is a bright red double orb that is intertwining with itself, and it comes right past me. It doesn't go through me, it comes round me and right past the camera. Now I filmed this off a phone, so I don't know what the quality is going to be like. It looks okay on my phone, but we'll see what it's like. That smoke's just someone breathing, so we're just having a dance. That's my very awful dancing. I dance much better to Northern Soul, by the way. It's difficult with no talcum powder on the floor. So what you see is around, it's cold, well we've got gloves and scarves. So he comes round in a minute there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's bright red, and if you look, there's 2 of them. So there's 2 of them, and it looks like they're dancing with each other, kind of intertwining with each other. And the people filming it see it, you can hear them go, what's that? As it flies past the camera. I must say her dancing's worse. See, so you can see 2. So what you can see is you can see all the rest of the smoke. I'll just play the start of it again. So you can see, probably on a clearer picture, you can see the dust that's being kicked up by ourselves, and it's all going up because we're kicking it up from the floor. But this particular orb is coming down. It comes around me as if it's intelligent enough to think I'm not going to walk into him. And it looks like they're both dancing with each other. See that one go up? Everything's going up like it's dust, but that's moving in its own direction. And it's an interesting piece of footage, really. Almost like it was dancing to the music of us, which is quite nice. So, poor Norm. Everyone thought he was a piece of dust. So we filmed things down in cellars, and we do a place at what's called the Electric Club, which is a local social club in Wolverhampton. And we do like a live feed down in the cellar where we'll put 4 or 5 people in the cellar, and we have a camera, and the rest of us sit up in the bar where it's nice and warm and comfortable, and we watch them on the. And what's interesting is you see the orbs, or you see the dust. You're in a cellar, and it all seems to go in the same direction. Most of the time it's going up because people are kicking it up from the floor. But every now and then you'll see one that kind of acts independent of everyone else, and it looks quite intelligent the way it moves. So you think, well, it could be a fly or a moth or a gnat or something like that. But it's watching how the other people on the camera react to that orb, because you'll see something fly past someone and you'll see them go like that, or they'll go like that. And we've got walkie-talkies, so you say, you know, mate, and he'll go, oh, something just kind of hit my head. And you go, yeah, we saw it. So if it's not a fly, which it possibly could be, then it's the manifestation of a spirit, and now you sense it, and you can see them sense it at the same time. Something will fly past 2 of them, and now both kind of go like that, and you're alright, you go, yeah, I just felt like something walked in front of me, that's what it did. You know, we saw it on the camera. So there is something in orbs, but you have to, when you take pictures, you see the light reflecting from the sun, and sometimes it's just a fault in the picture that you've taken, so it's just light refraction or something. But there is something in orbs.
There's 2 massive orbs in our, when we were at the altar getting married, there's 2 massive massive round ones, so we got married.
Yeah, well, talk about the round ones. So my mum...
Really big and huge ones.
Yeah, so in the house that my mum and dad live in now, so it's the one that my dad's auntie kind of visits us, my brother and my dad were sat watching the TV late at night, and an orb came through the living room window, through the curtains, about the size of a football. And I said to them, well, what did it, you know, was it like a light shining on the wall? And they said, no, it looked 3D, it looked like you could pick it up and move it around. It came through, about that high, it dropped down to about a couple of inches off the carpet, and at the time the dog was on the floor. She kind of stood up and went and followed this thing as it went into the kitchen and disappeared.
You can see it.
Yeah, they both just sat there going like that. And I think Match of the Day was on at the time, so it must have been interesting to draw their attention away from that. And this dog ran into the kitchen doorway and started growling and barking and whimpering at the kitchen before eventually he just kind of came back down and lay at the floor. And many a time the dog would be asleep in the kitchen, and Sally can vouch for this, and she would sprint into the living room and go and then sit in the kitchen doorway looking back at where she was, and then eventually she'd go back to bed in the kitchen.
Did you see it? Did you see the orb?
I didn't. My dad and my brother had. Now since then, we've been in the garden and we've seen an orb smaller come up the garden, onto the patio, around the back of our chair where we've been sat, and disappear. Now the dog's died, unfortunately, and we think it's the dog because it followed exactly the same path. She's a weird dog, and she basically left a mark in the garden where she used to run up and down. She'd use the same patch all the time, and it followed the path that she'd left in the grass up onto the patio, through the 2 plant pots that she would always go through, despite my mum telling her off, and round the back of the chair when she would come for a fuss and a scratch. So we think that was the dog. But it's interesting that we've seen these orbs in the garden. Yeah. So, has anyone got any questions about orbs or?
Well, we're down in Glastonbury, summer solstice 2010, with approximately 14 other people. We saw 3 tennis ball diameter orbs, 5 metres from us, just dancing around each other. It's what I was talking to you before. Yeah. But I have seen other orbs from a physical eye.
Well, the first thing I thought when my dad told me about this was ball lightning. So everyone's aware of the ball lightning phenomenon, yeah. I've even seen it, where it kind of bounces across the field and then dissipates. And people often describe the smell of sulphur when ball lightning kind of explodes. We didn't get that smell in the house, or my brother and my dad didn't get that smell. We didn't get it in the garden. So I've kind of ruled out ball lightning. So I don't know what else it could be.
A lot of orbs have been seen over crop circles and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me it's energy. I think it's consciousness manifesting itself in a physical form. And a lot of people say an orb is when a ghost is beginning to appear. But I just think it's a ball of consciousness that's existing outside of a physical form. So we are basically consciousness stuck in this vessel. I didn't choose to look like this, but it's just consciousness. So I'm not Kieran. This body isn't Kieran. The consciousness that's inside is Kieran.
As David Icke says.
Yeah, and I think what you're seeing when you see an orb is a physical form of consciousness. Yeah. Just because it doesn't look like how we look, it is still consciousness.
Well, I've just gotten a photograph sent to me from a friend, and he went to the caves down Yorkshire.
Oh yeah.
And he says, Pauline, you've got to see this photograph in the caves. And I showed you all that. And there's just loads of orbs. If you zoom in on all the orbs, and every orb has got a face inside all the orbs.
Come on to that.
All the faces are different as well.
That could be the pareidolia effect, but I'll come on to that. So the next one I'll talk about is a spirit box. I do have. So is anyone familiar with a spirit box? Anyone not familiar with a spirit box? No? Okay. So it's also called a Frank's box because the guy that came up with it is called Frank. Now all this is it's a radio scanner, but it has the certain ability within it removed so it doesn't stop on a particular frequency. So we know in your car you push a button to get to the next radio station, and when it gets there it stops and you listen to your sound. This will get to the next station, but it won't stop, and it keeps scanning through all the different stations for about a millisecond. And what you get is basically a collection of noises going as it scans through all the different frequencies. So if I try and turn it on, and I can show you. Like that, basically. So you can change the rate that it sweeps. So you can hear it going slower now. And you can make it go faster again. Like so. Now because we're in a building, I'm not sure how well it will pick up the radio. You can hear bits of words and bits of radio stations as it picks it up, and you'll get bits of sound and music. And the idea is that the spirit will use these frequencies. Turn it down a bit. The spirit will use these frequencies to communicate with us by using the white noise and the static and the frequency, so we can hear what they say. Now that's not a ghost. That's just a radio station that you just picked up. So that could have been Heart FM or whatever. And you can see the frequencies that they're on at the time. So I know when it gets to 100.7. That's Heart FM. I don't choose to listen to Heart FM, she does. So you're just getting presenters talking. But the idea is that the spirit will pick those particular words to form the word to communicate with you. So I turned this on the night before last when I was getting it all ready to bring up here. And I just turned it on and I went, hello, and it went, who's that? And I was like, nope, turn it back on again. Not tonight. So I had a very interesting experience with this, and it involved my nan. So on my nan died at around about 1 o'clock in the morning, and as you do the next day, we all gathered around as a family. And my granddad asked myself and my brother to go and empty, well not empty, but move the furniture around in their house. She got the bed downstairs and the table upstairs. So my brother and myself went down and we started moving everything around, and he said, oh, you know, let's see if we can talk to her, you know, see if she's still here. And as every good paranormal investigator does, I've got one in my car. So I just nipped out to the car and I grabbed the spirit box and I said, we'll try and see if we can talk to her. So we turned it on and said, Nan, are you here? And we got what sounded like a yes. And I thought, you could hear a yes. So I said, you know, Nan, Grandad's up at Mum and Dad's at the moment. And we heard Raymond. That's my Grandad's name. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And we said, yeah, Raymond, he's up at Mum and Dad's. And we got Adrian. And I thought, right, that's Dad's name. What's the chances of that? As you've just heard, what's the chances? And I thought, okay. So I said, yeah, Adrian, Dad. And then she said, Kieran. And she would never say Kieran, don't ask me why. It was always Kieran. And Cam said, hey, that's what she used to say. And I was like, yeah, man. So at this point we're thinking, right, Raymond, Adrian, Kieran, all in a row. That's nigh on impossible. So I thought, we're on to something here. So my brother said, Nan, are you in pain anymore? And she said, no, died of some form of cancer. The reason I say that is because we still don't actually know. And so he said, are you in pain? She said, no. And then there was kind of just like a noise where it sounded like she was just talking. And my brother said, who are you talking to? And she said, they're my grandchildren. So as you've just heard, it's very stabby. So to get such a long word, you know, phrase as they're my grandchildren, let alone the fact that we were her grandchildren, is such an interesting kind of answer to get. So at this point we thought, God, we're actually talking to her here. And she carried on talking for a bit, and then she came out with the word terrified. So we were like, terrified, you know, so it took a bit of a turn here, you know, what are you terrified for? And then it stopped, literally like that. What you can hear now? Nothing. And I was like, great. So I'm banging it on the table, and I'm like, come on, work, kick back in. And it kicked back in, and all we heard was that static for about 10 seconds, and my brother was going, what are you terrified of? And then it just kicked back in, and she went, God. And I just kind of went, dropped it on the settee and went outside, because I don't believe in God. And that, I went outside and I was like, no, I can't deal with that, don't know. And my brother stayed, and apparently she told him to go upstairs to her bedroom, and then eventually it fizzled out and it came out to me. But I can't explain that, because if anyone's ever done a spirit box session, it's like I say, it's very short, stabby kind of words that you get. So to get there, my grandchildren, to get all 3 names of our family members, said how she would say them, and she's terrified of God. I couldn't deal with that. So we didn't tell like Mum and Dad or Granddad what we'd done for obvious reasons. Because I don't believe in it, it was making me question my beliefs.
What was Ruben?
She wasn't religious. But in hindsight, when we've actually sat down and discussed it together, she'd been dead like 7 hours. And we think that she was in this kind of limbo world. And we liken it to being sat in a doctor's waiting room. So when we heard her talking to other people that have just passed, she was probably a bit confused and she didn't understand what was going on. So she was probably just kind of, I'm a bit scared, and she didn't know what was going on. Whether she'd met God or not, I don't know. Whether she was stood in front of a big ball of light or a bloke with a beard, I don't know. But I just didn't feel comfortable with what she'd said. And I don't mind having my beliefs questioned, that's why I do this. So it was just a very interesting thing that we'd had with the spirit box.
the spirit, what would you say, is probably your number one form of communication, would you say?
For this? No.
Just to
no.
So I'm going to ask you about the spirit box. Where would you rank that for communication with spirit? First, second, third?
Wouldn't be in my top 3.
Wouldn't be in your top 3.
Because of that. The perception of apparently significant patterns or recognisable images, especially faces in random or accidental arrangements of shapes and lines. So you'll hear something that you want to hear. And I had a very vivid experience with my nan, and my brother heard exactly what I heard, and we didn't lead each other on, we'd heard it. However, we've been in investigations and we've had 5 or 6 people sat around the spirit box. How many spirits are with us? Tell us how many spirits there are. And someone will go, oh, I heard 6. And someone will go, I heard 2. And someone will say, I thought he said 13. And you think, well, how can you get those words mixed up? How can you think they sound like each other? So what they're doing is they're hearing what they want to hear, so it's their subconscious telling them. Just like if I've had people come, one of our close friends, her brother hung himself, and she kept, never shown an interest in ghosts, but she came on an investigation, clearly because she wanted to talk to her brother. And all night she kept telling us, I can hear someone calling Anna, someone keeps saying Anna. Nobody else could hear it, just her. Now, that doesn't mean that it wasn't happening, but it also means that there was a potential that her grief was so much for her that she was creating this scenario, and she was hearing things that weren't really there. Now, if that meant that she went home and it helped her grieve and it helped her mourn the death of her brother, then brilliant, you know, fine, we did our job and it helps her get over it. But it doesn't prove that it was real.
So,
it was
sorry
real
to
to her.
interrupt again.
That's
What's your top 3? If I want to communicate with the spirit, what's your top
Spirit
3?
board.
Yeah. That's your number 1, the spirit
That's
board?
no, my number 1 is me. The human body.
You mean the pendulum?
No, just me.
Just meditation and
you.
getting
We're all
messages.
the best piece of equipment you can have is yourself.
So you mean through clairvoyance, clairaudience and
So
meditation?
anything, if you sit there and you feel like something's just touched you, or something's speaking to you, or you sense something, or you hear something, or you see something, you're the best piece of equipment, because that can be cheated with, as I mentioned earlier. It can also have faulty batteries where it starts going mad because there's batteries in it that aren't working properly and it's lighting up when it shouldn't be. It could also be near a piece of electrical wiring that you don't know about, so you think something's happening paranormal, but it's not.
So what's your second and third one then?
My second and third one, I like the EVP recorder, which I can get to speak about. And I also probably have to say, I like the grid pen, but I mean, I don't know, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. So
I haven't got a spirit box. I was thinking about getting...
I'd get one, and you can get them on the phone, but there's also evidence that have suggested people like patterns and they just repeat themselves.
Yeah.
So they're not actually frequencies that you're scanning through, they're just preloaded voices.
You know, the Alice app, that's a load of rubbish, because on their website it claims spirit communicate through the app by picking out the words. How can a spirit go through the machine code, noughts and ones, right, in the software, to look for the words?
Yeah, to know what they want.
Yeah, plus, I think the likes on the Alice app has artificial intelligence, like, you know, the microphone, you can listen to what the people are saying.
And picks it up.
Yeah, I
definitely.
think, I don't believe the app does sort of thing.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. So the spirit box for me, it's good, because I had that great experience with it, but it also opens up so much to pareidolia. So a version of pareidolia is that, so you're probably familiar with the face on Mars. Is it a face, is it not? We don't know. But it looks like a face, because it looks like it's got 2 eyes, a nostril and a mouth.
Richard Hall, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched a good lecture by Mike Barra, who's spoken about this as well.
And on Richard Planet, you know, if you watch Richard Planet, he thinks there's enough evidence through geometry or angles and all that sort of thing that is not natural. That's unnatural.
Yeah. And to be honest, I probably would agree. But it's just an example of where people will see a face where potentially there isn't any clouds and things.
Have you done white noise where you put blank tape in a
Well, effectively that's what this is. When it's scanning through the static, it's just a bunch of white noise, and then every now and then you hear that, you heard those words.
What's in that exactly? Is it just?
Like I say, all this is it's a radio scanner. So you could listen to the radio.
It's called radio.
It's called a spirit box.
Is that what you look on the internet?
Yeah, look for a spirit box.
Really?
Yeah.
It tunes
And
in.
all they do is they take the ability out. They basically flick the switch. So when it finds the frequency, instead of staying on it like your car radio does, it will just keep moving from one to the next.
So you hear voices?
So you hear the different voices, yeah.
Really?
So this is what I heard my nan on, yeah.
Is that the PSB 7, is it?
That's it, yeah.
Would you say the PSB 11 is better?
Probably, it depends. I mean, again, as with any piece of equipment, with anything you do in your life, whether you're a golfer or a footballer or whatever, the more money you pay for a piece of equipment, the better.
How much is that one? How much do you look
I think it was about 35 when I bought
Can
it.
you record it?
You can't record, but obviously you just use an EVP recorder to record.
Do you think the PSB's, the spirit box, you'd say just as good as anything else?
Oh, well, there's a guy who's in my group. He makes a radio engineer, so he makes his own, which is great for us. Which actually, in fact, I'll talk about that when I get to the But
so I'm thinking about getting one.
It can't hurt. Like I say, I've had a very good experience with it. And like I turned it on the other night, and Sally was there, and my friend was there, and I just went, hello, and he went, who's that? And we all kind of looked at each other, so we all heard it. But again, there's that power of suggestion. So if someone says, I swear he said Jeff, and someone will go, yeah, it sounded like Jeff. And
you could
everybody knows Jeff.
You record the whole session. And then
you can record the whole session and listen back to see what you get.
Check what you really get.
Exactly. So, any other questions on the spirit box before I move on?
Kieran, have you heard of Harry Oldfield?
Harry Enfield?
No, Harry Oldfield. Yeah, he's got a few sort of paraphernalia that picks up different frequencies.
Right.
I just thought you might want to check him out.
Yeah, sure. What's his name? Oldfield.
Harry Oldfield.
Okay.
But he's got a
Aura camera.
like a scanner which scans like the which
Basically
is like that. Yeah. And also a camera which picks up the chakras and the meridians and everything.
Okay, so it's something like that. Like
I'm fortunate enough to have one. So, but no, it's like that's just the thermal. This is like
that's it. Yeah, but it's similar to that. Yeah.
Similar thing. But he's photographed incredible things.
Yeah,
incredible stuff. So
Harry Oldfield.
And I've got the filters, but I've had no look with the filters on the camera. But he's had amazing.
But it's interesting that he's following the same kind of theory as myself, with the frequencies and how they operate.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so my next piece of equipment is the thermal imaging camera. So again, this is Maureen. So this is similar. It's basically a thermal kind of temperature gauge. Good. So you point it at a surface, it bleeps, and it tells me that that wall is 22.3 degrees. Okay. 32.9. My head is. So what this basically is a cheaper version of that. Because again, as I say, the more money you pay for these pieces of equipment, the better the gadget is basically. So this is the one that we've got, and what it does is it enables you to film, so you can record what you're filming, and it also enables you to take screenshots. So if you think, oh, that looks like a man sat on the chair, you push a button, takes a screenshot, and it stores it as a picture for you, which you can then upload to your computer using a USB stick or an SD card. Because this is cheaper, it just takes the temperature recording of a surface. So if someone says, oh, my hand feels cold, I feel like someone's holding my hand, you can just point the laser at the hand and it'll tell you what temperature it is, and then you point it at the other hand and you can say, oh yeah, it is considerably colder than your other hand. The reason I like these pieces of equipment is because they back up what you see and what you feel. So the way these work is by using infrared, really. So you can see where he's red, that's because he's red, and then you can see, you might be able to just see the scale here. So as it goes down through orange, yellow, green and blue, it gets that's what's colder. So he's a bit colder down here than he is up there. And all that is the object is releasing infrared, and therefore it's cooling down. So when you microwave some food, you're basically bombarding it with infrared, and you're warming it up. And then when you take it out of the microwave, it starts to lose the heat, it starts to release the infrared. So as you point that camera at your microwave lasagna, it would be bright red, and then if you did it in half hour, it would be blue, as it's released the infrared. So I like these. We did one with this, and we had it on a chair, and the chair was bright red as if someone was sat in it. And we found that quite interesting. And when we looked closer, we could see that there was a little dimple in the chair, as if somebody was sat on the chair. So we brought in another chair, and we sat a guy next to this chair, and he sat there for about 5 minutes, and he eventually got out of the chair, and we kind of shone that on it, and it was bright red. So just where he basically passed his heat onto the chair, and you could see that it was warm. The chair next to it was still bright red, as if something was sat on it. So what this does, if we go back to the frequency theory, is it enables you to see into the world of the infrared, things that you wouldn't see with your eyes. I can't see that you know, if you all stood up now, your chairs would be warm because you've been sat on it, you've transferred that heat energy onto the chair. That would pick it up, but your human eyes can't. So it just helps us see into an unknown world, basically. It helps us see things that don't exist. Oh, sorry. Blue's cold, yeah, so it gives you like a little grid there when you've got it on your screen. So the red shows warmer. So if I was to hold this for a few seconds and then let go and then take a picture of that, it would show as red because I've transferred my heat to it. So like I say, if you could show a chair, 2 chairs next to each other, one would be red and one would be blue, and it's because someone's sitting in that. It was really interesting, you know, no one had sat in that chair, but it was showing heat as if someone had sat in it.
Because I've got a metal plate in one of my legs and it's cold all the time.
Okay.
And the other leg's hot.
Right.
So would that come up blue?
It'd be very interesting to do it.
I know.
Where is it?
Here.
Here. Oh, where the scar is.
Yeah.
Well, hang on, let me do that then. 25.8. 27. It's warmer.
That's warm. Is it? Yeah, it's freezing.
I've got metal inside mine now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's well, you've just got a metal object though. Don't forget, metal doesn't absorb heat. I used to work in a metal warehouse in summer. It was nice and cool because it deflects heat. It doesn't absorb it. So that's something to think about. So it just brings me back to that slide that I had at the start, where basically that piece of equipment allows us to see down here. Like I say, if you were to kind of take a picture of what you just microwaved, you'd see that it was red because it's absorbed all the infrared. So that side isn't dangerous. So those wavelengths and those frequencies don't have the ability to break down the molecules of a living being, whereas that does. So constant exposure to these frequencies can break down the molecules and the atoms of a living being, and this is where we get when we start talking about 5G and things like that. So as you can see, they're a much denser frequency, and that's why they've had to cut down all the trees across England to accommodate 5G, because it's such a dense frequency you can't get through the trees. So they've had to. We're now the least forested area in Europe, thanks to 5G. But it just gives you a bit of a visualisation of how it works. Any other questions on the thermometer?
Just on the getting back to the scale, when you were saying about the ultraviolet light, it's interesting, isn't it, that in the more sort of most modern toilets now, public toilets, you've got the ultraviolet light, which kills the bacteria. And yet that's in that range where...
It's in the range that's bad, but like I said, there's been a lot of research by Paranormal Theory. I know Barry Fitzgerald did a lot of this, and he talks about how ultraviolet repels negative energy, kills bacteria, and how infrared harnesses negative energy. So, like I say, and isn't it interesting how they're both just either side of our frequency range as well? So we use ultraviolet torches on our investigation. Like I say, we use them on the spirit boards too.
Well, heating the planet for 5G, aren't they, with infrared, you see?
What, sorry?
Heating the planet of 5G will be heating the planet.
Well, infrared is basically the sun. Is how we get warm from the infrared that is given to us from the sun.
So it looks like we should. I know I'm looking at that chart. I know what I think the answer is, but looking at that chart, which is the denser energy, infrared or ultraviolet?
Well, you can see the frequency ranges here.
Yeah.
So that's when they start to get denser.
Yeah. So in other words, that's interesting.
So as that goes, basically what that means is you're getting more frequency range per wavelength, basically.
But it's interesting how you're saying the dark spirits are more attracted to the higher vibrational infrared, and the good spirits are more attracted to the denser vibration.
Well, we did. The reason that started with basically doing this presentation is because I want to explain to people that there are different ways to communicate with spirits than you see on Most Haunted and things like that. So what we did, for say the one guy who's a radio here, we went into a room, probably half the size of this, and we took in 2 EMF emitters, and we started flooding the room with electromagnetic frequency. It's basically what a radio station would use to transfer their sounds. So we started flooding the room with EMF, and at the same time we had like a walkie-talkie, so a radio receiver, that we could tune into all the different frequencies that we were emitting. And we had an EMF meter, so one of these, and we had a REM pod, which I'll get onto in a minute. And we were asking questions, and we flooded the room with EMF, flooded it. And for about 10 minutes or so, nothing happened. The EMF was just boring, everything was boring. And I got into a bit of a mood because nothing was going away. So I went around the room and turned off all the pieces of equipment. I was like, right, forget it, we're going. The second I did that, and we essentially emptied the room of the EMF that we'd been pumping into it, that started going crazy. The REM pod started going crazy, and everyone was like, oh, hang on, something's going on. And the way I theorise is what we'd done is we'd prevented that particular spirit entering the room because we'd blocked his particular frequency with all the other frequencies. So imagine if we just ran this room full of people and another person tried to get in, he wouldn't be able, he physically can't get in. So once we'd emptied the room, he kind of, I'm in. And then he could communicate with us on the frequency that he wished to communicate with us on.
You're talking about that before. Are you saying if I have a higher vibrational state, frequency, the lower vibrational, denser beings can't influence me? Because you were saying that before, whatever frequency state we're in, only certain frequency beings can have an influence.
Well, they can try. I think they can try.
Yeah.
But it's just like a radio. So I can't listen to digital radio in my car because I don't have the ability on my radio to do it.
So if you're negative, you've got a better chance of...
If you pump out negative energy, you're going to get negative back. You're going to attract negative. Same with if you're pumping out positive energy, you'll get positive.
So if you're positive energy...
But I believe that we have the ability to transcend through the whole range of frequencies. I mean, we just drink fluoride in our water and we eat chemicals in our food that dumbs us down, and it basically prevents us from reaching the full potential that we actually can as a species.
So if I'm positive and high vibrational, these dark,
you'll get it back.
Demonic forces can't really...
They can try,
they can have a try.
But you'll propel them really with your positive energy. Okay, so the next piece of equipment is a laser grid pen. Anyone heard of this? Laser grid pen? No?
I've seen them. I've been to a ghost
centre. So I quite like these. But everyone's had a laser pen. I used to have one as a kid and really annoyed the neighbours with them. And all you do is you put a little cap on the end of the laser pen, and it splits it into multiple points of light, and you shine it onto a blank wall, just like that. And all it does is it allows you to see shadows better than you would if you were just staring at a wall in the darkness. So as you can see, it just enables you to see shadows in front of it, really. It's quite interesting. We've seen figures, like humanoid figures, move across the points of light. However, one thing to remember is if you stare at a laser for longer than a couple of minutes, it starts to mess with your eyes, doesn't it? So if you're staring in the pitch black at a wall full of laser beams, you're going to start kind of going, ugh, and seeing things that aren't really there. The other thing you need to remember if you use one of these is if you shine it on a wall that isn't completely flat. So if you shine it on a wall that's got lumps in or objects in front of it, the laser can't focus properly because it's trying to find a solid object to sit on. So you start to notice that the lights are turning or they're moving or they're wobbling, and it's because they're trying to focus onto something that they can't. So you might think, oh, paranormal, but it's just that the laser can't sit on a flat surface. We did this down Draco tunnels, and we got through 6 batteries in our laser pen in about half hour. Completely drained the batteries. Could say that it was a faulty grid pen, but it only ever happened there. They take 2 batteries at a time, ours do. And it got to the point where, as it was starting to diminish, the one person in our crew went, "Oi, make it brighter again," and it went back up to full brightness. And he said, "Okay, dim it again," and it went down. And about 4 or 5 times we asked that, and it kept brightening and dimming on request.
That happened at the ghost centre I was on,
Yeah, and then eventually it died. and we had to change the batteries again. So I do like the laser grid paint because it just gives us a different way of seeing shadows in the dark, you know, because it's quite difficult to see a shadow in the dark. It just enables us to see it. However, just remember that you're staring at a laser beam, and it will become an optical illusion, and you will see things just because it's playing tricks on your mind. You're staring at a laser for a long time isn't a good idea. Any questions on that? Oh, by the way, all these equipment you can get on the internet. It's just that people will stick the word ghost on it, and you pay £20 more. So always look at ways of getting it a little bit cheaper. You can get a laser pen, stick a cap on it yourself that you've pierced some holes in, and voila, you get a laser pen. REM pod. So this stands for Radiating Electromagnetism Pod. That's why we call it a REM. It's easier to say. So it's similar to an EMF meter in that it's got lights. Has anyone ever heard of this piece of equipment? I love this. I'm going to throw this into my top 3 to answer your question. I love this piece of equipment. So it's got an aerial, and the reason for that is because where this differs from an EMF meter, so this just basically picks up on any disturbances in the surrounding EMF. This produces its own electromagnetic field. So it pumps out its own field and then basically picks up on any disturbances. So have you all heard of a theremin, the musical instrument? It's like a weird shaped thing and they go like that, but they don't actually touch it. That's how this works. All you're doing is you're disturbing its field, so it makes a noise and it gets louder as you get closer, and then it diminishes as you pull away. So this particular model has lights on it as well, so it will flash when it's picking something up as well. It's just another piece of evidence for you. I love this. So what we tend to do is, as with most of this equipment, is we'll just leave it on a table or on the floor or on a chair. We won't touch it, and because it makes a loud noise, loud enough that you'd hear it probably from the hall that we were in now. So if we were on an investigation and we were sat in here, you'd hear it kicking off in there. And what it does for me, it's quite solid evidence that something is interfering with that field. So if something goes near it and you hear it, you think something's there now to make that go off. And people that can afford multiple ones of these will often line them up in a room, and there's evidence where people have heard one go off, then the next one, then the next one, as if something's just walking down the room past them. I remember at one investigation I had, I felt like something was like hugging my back and stood right behind me, and my mate came up to me with this and kind of held it near my back, and it started going off, and then he pulled it away and it stopped. And then every time I walked near him that night, it would go off again. And so it just kind of proved me right that I felt what I felt. So this is the thing where I spoke about my human pendulum experience when I got knocked over. This was it sat in the corner of the room going crazy. And the second I left the room, that shut up. And when I walked back into the room, it started going off again. It was quite an interesting piece of equipment. Any questions on that?
Can you communicate the spirit
Yeah,
by
so
saying, say, 2 flashes is a yes?
Yeah, so it's the same with an
no?
EMF meter, you can do that.
So you've actually communicated the spirit
yeah, but
through
it's,
that ramp
it's
up.
not so much a yes and no answer with this, because it's making a noise or it isn't making a noise. So if you say give me a no answer and it doesn't make a noise, you can't know for sure that it's saying no, it's just not answering it.
How often have you communicated with a spirit like that?
I love this.
Yeah.
We get a lot of activity with this.
So I could get one and at home talk to Mel.
Just all you have to say is, if there's a spirit here, can you come and interact with this device? And always explain what it is, because again, if you're talking to someone who's from 1255, he doesn't know what this is. He's looking at it thinking, what's that? Because in his timeline, you didn't have electric, or they didn't understand this. So when people say, come and speak into my phone, it's like, well, they don't know what a phone is, so you have to explain to them what it is you're holding and what it is they have to do. So you just say, you know, if there's a spirit here, can you please come near me, and you'll make this go off, and you will hear it go off. We have. Yeah.
On which one is?
Again, depends what you want to pay.
Right.
I've seen them on eBay for £60, £70. This particular model, because it's got the lights on, and you can also get them with an ADTT built in, which is the temperature. So it will make a noise if there's a sudden drop or rise in temperature.
Yeah.
So again, you can pay a couple of £100 for a higher model. But the guy in our crew built ours, because he's that radio engineer. Yeah. So he used curtain wire as the antenna.
Oh.
Yeah, but it works. So again, just a bit of information there on how it works. Do always put it on a steady surface, because if you're holding it and you're in a tight space with other people, all you have to do is like be this close to someone and it's going to make a noise because you're disturbing the field. So you have to be careful. Oh, there's a ghost. No, it's just his elbow or her elbow, or you know, you have to be careful with it. So EVP recorder. So we all know what an EVP recorder is. Basically, just a dictaphone. That's all it is. So this is a DVR, which is a digital voice recorder. The reason we call it an EVP recorder is because what you capture is known as an electronic voice phenomenon. So that's what you're hearing when you hear a disembodied voice talking to you over one of these. So remember when I spoke about the growl that I'd heard and then disappeared? Hello. Because it's obviously picking up frequencies that the human ear can't detect. And I just find that fascinating. So if you watch things like My Ghost Story and programs like this, it's what they'll do is they'll say, hello, is anyone here? And they don't hear anything. But when they listen back to this, they'll hear someone going, hello, or hello, it's John, or something like that. And their own ears didn't hear. So again, it's just allowing us to access frequencies and the unknown that we otherwise won't be able to access.
I guess what that's doing is detecting a frequency that doesn't actually, in reality, make a sound.
In our reality, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
but then obviously when it picks up that, it's got to manifest the sound.
It has to manifest the sound.
So we can hear it.
So it would pick us up as well. Obviously, it's just a recorder. That's all it is. It's just a recorder. It's a dictaphone.
Right, so it's not a special.
No. So again, depending on what you want, you can pay more money for these. Right. So you can pay a couple of £100 for a recorder, right. And all that does is the ability there is there's ones where you can push a button if you hear something. So then when you upload it to your computer, it will go. It will show you your bookmarks. Because otherwise you've got to sit through 4 hours of audio thinking, was it there that I heard it, or was it there that I heard it?
Get one that can bookmark, yeah.
But yeah, they're quite good, yeah.
But it's interesting how you hear a growl, but that just gets
a low, exactly. And of course the other thing to remember is how you hold these pieces of equipment. So if you're recording it and you're walking around going like that, you're going to hear just a lot of rustling and a lot of noise, and you might think, oh, that was a ghost, but no, it's just you kind of going as you're walking around recording on it. And again, you have that pareidolia effect that I spoke about, because you're going to hear something and you might think, oh, that sounded like that, but you're just making it sound like it. So an example of that is, on My Ghost Stories, I'll show these and I'll put the subtitles on the bottom of the screen of what they're saying. So I did this with Sally, and when you read what they say, it's almost a power of suggestion. You think, oh yeah, that's what it's saying. So I covered the subtitles, asked her to tell me what this EVP said. She came up with something obscure, I can't remember what it was. When I removed my arm and showed her what the subtitles were saying that it had said, it was nowhere near what she had said. Nothing like. And she went, oh yeah, I can hear it now. And it's because the subtitles had told her what to hear. So it's just something else to remember. If someone says, oh, are you not hearing that? Just try and make your own mind up before you listen to what they've got to say. So yeah, again, the pareidolia effect, perception of apparently significant patterns or recognisable images. So I'm kind of near the end. I mean, these are dowsing rods. Anyone dowsed?
Yeah.
So these, if you want to have a play with these after, please feel free. We did a bit of a session.
Yeah, we did at Dawn's house because Dawn's got a ghost.
Yeah, so we did a session there, and interestingly,
we got his name, his age.
Yes and no answers at the same time.
Yeah, we got quite a bit, didn't we?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what these are made of, like aluminium, I guess, or something. But they're best made out of copper because copper is the most conductive material, except for silver. It's actually more conductive than gold, this copper. But who can afford gold and silver? So we use copper, and it just conducts energy and things a lot easier. And the idea is you just hold them, you ask for yes and no answers, just like you would with a pendulum, and you kind of get your answers. So they're quite interesting, but again, there's a lot of that subconscious element involved where you could be answering the yes and no.
I've got the dowsing rods in a plastic cylinder, so I can't psychologically.
We've got the same. They're just sleeves that you put over there, so you can't. You're not actually holding the metal itself.
Yeah. And amethyst geodes got a blank floor. When there's nothing there, they don't cross over. And I go over amethyst geode on the floor, cross over, and I make sure.
Originally they were used to find like sources of water in the desert and things like that. So there's something in it.
Yeah.
So just to kind of round up, so this is my Facebook page for anyone that wants to visit us. So we've got a podcast that's starting at the end of this month. We're going to be interviewing guests and whatever. So if you head to facebook.com, The Paranormal Paradigm, we've got a page and there's a group that you can ask to join. I'll accept you. And then, like I say, if you head over to that page, we'll be uploading our links to our podcasts. They're on YouTube, Podbean, all the Spotify, all the usual links that you can go to. So that's us. I host that with a guy called Ben, who's also in my team, just like my co-host. That's it really. If anyone's got any other questions.
Can you put that back on, please?
Sorry.
I want to have my phone there. Keeping up.
Any other questions while
Just one quick thing.
Yeah.
In all your experiences with all the equipment and everything,
Yeah.
have any spirits come through that generally need help? Have you able to psychically without all them?
We've asked spirits, are you stuck here?
Yeah.
And stuff, but we've had yes. Can you leave? And they've said no. But I don't class myself as being able to free them or help them, so I'm not going to pretend to help them. You know, we kind of just say, okay, thank you, and we leave. And it's sad.
So you don't clean houses as such?
No, because we're not that way inclined.
No.
We could help them prove that there is something there.
Yeah.
But I guess you'd have to get someone a little bit more special.
But you can identify who they are. And
yeah, we can get names and the situations that they're in. One thing that frustrates me on ghost tours, when I talk about this, is that people are still using the same equipment that they've used for years and years. And for me, the investigative world isn't progressing how it should be with all the technology that we have these days. They're still using microwave leakage detectors to try and prove that ghosts exist. And I think there's so much better ways that we could do it now. That why are we still using this, and why are we sticking ghost on the back of it and charging £40? So it's just a money-making scam.
Do you think a lot of these companies, an awful lot on Facebook that's paying lots of money and going on these ghost tours?
Well, I spoke about this at the start, didn't I? You know,
Exactly.
that people are paying. We have people that we did Draco and we would charge £20 a ticket, and there's another group that do Draco and charge £80 a ticket.
They do, I've seen it, it's not cheap. Some of
Yeah, and they're getting the same as us.
Yeah.
But because, like I said, because they're charging so much, they have to ensure that you have a good time.
So
otherwise, you want your
things,
money
you
back.
think.
Yeah, so they begin to invent things and make things up.
What's your most intense paranormal activity you've ever had, and
We've got to
what's the
finish the next show at
nicest?
some point.
Yeah, what's the most intense paranormal activity you've ever had, and what's the nicest paranormal?
The nicest would be when we've had things like that guy who spoke to his dad on the spirit board. And the nasty is probably when I got hit on the head because he was physically assaulted.
Okay, thanks.
Right, I'm not going to ask us any more
No
questions.
more questions. Hang on, Ella.
We're on a time limit here, so, and we do have Coral Rider, by the way, starting at 6 o'clock to do our spirit drones. Okay, so it just remains for me to say a very big thank you. Put your hands together for Kieran. It's a fascinating subject, this, and really what comes out of it is we are transmitter receivers, and the human body is the best tool, really, because these are all just tools. What Kieran's shown you. I use a pendulum. Basically.
We're not having a difference.
That's the same tool as many of those things, right? So, it's good.
Can people play with your pendulum lead, Andy?
I've got a little gift for you.
Oh, okay.
But I to give our speakers a gift.
Right.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Kieran and his wife are expecting a first baby. Huge congratulations.
Yes.
Yep.
Correct. This is a present for your wife.
Thank you.
There you go. And we didn't want to leave you out. Present for Dad. Baby tips for Dad. There you go. And it's Rosika Northeast.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kieran.
Thank you.
Interesting talk. Should we come back?
Yes.
There's one more.
After your baby
Yes, I'm going to keep you busy. Well, I've got a book coming out soon, but I've